The third thing is something I always say, and it is related to the first two, which is that the customer's money is better than the investor's money. Because if you're getting the customer's money and you're getting it repeatedly at a price that's higher than your cost, then chances are you have a viable business if you get enough customers, right? And if you're getting customer money, you will almost certainly get investor money, because investors love to invest behind business that are getting the customer's money. On the other hand, if you're getting the investor's money first, it does not necessarily follow you get the customer's money, because getting investors' money sometimes is about impressing a couple of mid-20s MBAs with your PowerPoint, but getting the customer's money repeatedly, is a hell of an achievement, right? And it's a much harder act. It's about having conversations, continuous conversations, open conversations, and disclosures, right? So let's take revenue recognition. Right? So let's say you're selling a product at a discount. The discounted price, the revenue, actually the money you actually got from the customer. Now, common sense would tell me it should be the latter. But we all know that many companies did the former because they wanted to show higher GMV. And I must confess, in such practices, very often investors were willing collaborators because they wanted the next round in the company to come in at a higher valuation. And therefore you show that. And if competition is showing that, you also show it.
So the whole...
Or for example, in the kind of business, and NIIT was in, and you're familiar with it. But जब आप if you're in the franchising business, और आप किसी को franchisee बनाते हो, तो एक upfront franchisee fee होती है. Should that go in as revenue in the first year? Or should it be amortized over, say, 5, 7, 10 years? Whatever duration of the contract is. Right? Now, prudent accounting, true and fair accounting would say it's the latter. But, we all know there are enough companies who will do the former just to boost revenue this year so that they get a high valuation. These are dodgy accounting practices. And here is where I think even if the founder does not have great accounting knowledge, this is where the board, the independent directors, the investors come in and say, "Bhai, ये ठीक नहीं है, ये ठीक है, ये ऐसे करो."
Next in line, we have a panel discussion on designing the ideal hybrid model.
What are we exploring? We are exploring the what, why, and how of hybrid. How part is what will mean ideal hybrid. But if you don't understand the why and what of it, then I have a feeling we'll be incomplete in designing that. So with that, may I now request Vikas, Dr. Vikas Upadhyay, to please share the video of Mayank.
For me, education has got 3 to 4 broad components. I look at education into 3 broad components, specifically in the context of what we are doing at UpGrad. The first component of education business or education ecosystem is acquisition of customer. How do you reach out to the customer? How do you reach out to prospective learners? How do you engage with them and therefore talk to that individual learner to convince them that your product is the right product for their needs that they're looking at that point of time. Second is the learning play, which is the exact teaching and how people should teach and go through a teaching system over a period of time. And then third one is the outcomes play, which is where people focus on jobs, placements, increasing grades, cracking the right examination, so on and so forth. So when I look at education ecosystem to these 3 components of acquisition, learning, and outcomes, I think hybrid can play a role in all 3 of them in a different way, in a different manner. While at UpGrad, we believe that the second is a very sacrosanct piece, and we personally believe that the second element should happen largely in the online context, which is the learning element, should happen largely in the online context, because in that case you can maintain consistency. There could be some elements of blend, but my personal take is a blend or a hybrid, an offline coming in is a lot more needed in the acquisition front as well as in the outcomes front. Let me explain you what I mean by that. When it comes to acquisition, a lot of us focus on acquiring customers or acquiring potential learners from these digital platforms, search engine or social media platforms coming in. A person shows interest, a counselor will talk to them, they will go and meet them and then try to convince them. I think in that component of it, having physical presence, specifically in a country like India, is very critical. We are seeing in some of the large test prep companies that have got these physical centers located in different places. While they do teaching there, they also use these centers for better credibility, better trust, and better acquisition. I think as Upgrade, we have now sort of committed to opening about 100 plus centers, and this will solve the first part of the problem, which is about acquisition, because if I have presence across different parts of the country, and as they say in India, jo dikhta hai, wo bikta hai, and as you have the last mile presence, credibility, trust, and acquisition become much more seamless. When it comes to learning, while I personally believe that it should largely be online in the context of digital ecosystem, but there are interesting ways that online, offline can be blended. While at Upgrade, we don't believe in that hypothesis, but let me give you an example that an ideal model, if I had to do and revamp everything at Upgrade into a hybrid model, I would use online component as a pre-read before coming to the class, and use the Socratic way of learning and use the classroom-based teaching to deliver the lecture such that the person can start reinforcing the concepts that they have learned earlier. It's easier said than done, but I think if you flip the role of online and offline, or define a very clear role of online and offline medium, a hybrid system can really be created in a very meaningful manner. When it comes to outcomes, it's very difficult to sort of position what and how outcomes can be online, offline. So I'll give you an Upgrade example. For example, if you have a job placement and the 100 people who have come for a job drive, which is happening online, I see a conversion of about 10 to 15%. The same thing we did it last 2 weeks back on an offline context. About 150 people came for the job drive, and 75 found a job and job outcome.
What works in the, had worked for us and largely works in the test prep and the coaching domain are 3 or 4 things, right? One is clearly the learning, the pedagogy itself, the delivery of lectures, the testing of students. That's really what students come to your place like Akash or any other coaching institute for that matter for. And that's essential for them to appear in the exam at the end of the course and have a high probability of success. So that's number one. Number two really is, as we have studied this phenomena over the years, and some of us have gone through this journey ourselves, is really connection. I think the connection becomes a very important part because, these are young kids. At the end of the day, average age is, 16 to 18 years. And the connection at 2 points. One is with a teacher. India has a long ethos of the Guru's Shishya Parampara. And a good teacher, as we all know, can be a transformative experience for impressionable minds, right? So if you have a good teacher, you have a good connection with the teacher that can encourage you, that can egg you on. It's a tough journey at that age. So that we found to be a very meaningful, predictor of outcomes. And the other connection is really with your peer group, because by definition, these are competitive exams. So there is really while of course there is an absolute, but largely it is about, there is a very large group of people who are competing to come out on the other side, and only, there is obviously a big supply-demand gap, as we know, in the higher education space in India. So whether it's for medicine, whether it's for engineering, whether it's for MBA, any of those, the number of people competing and the number of seats is limited. So the peer group that you are with actually really allows you to base yourself on where do you stand vis-a-vis the competition, and that always can usually we've seen can be a very positive motivator for students to see kids around themselves or students around themselves that are. So that's number two. And the number three really for this age is about discipline. When we thought of designing the hybrid, we sort of, instead of using the terminology of how much online, how much offline, we said these are the 3 things that we have to solve for as we think of hybrid.
First-time job seekers who have just come out of school and they want to get into the workforce. The second set of learners is people who are already into the workforce, early career professionals who want to fast-track their career or want to move to an adjacent field. And finally, the executives who have been in the industry for quite some time and they're looking to reinvent themselves. What part of the training should happen online in a pure play video format? And as you know, most global platforms today that exist, it's all about self-learning. So there are curated programs and you're supposed to learn on your own. Maybe have some community where you can get some help, or maybe some AI-based chat engine that can help you clarify certain doubts. So that's one model where you are primarily responsible for your learning. The other model is that you come to a class with other students who are in the same boat as you, and you try to learn from an instructor. So what combination of training happens in a pure play video format versus what happens through an instructor-led model is also referred as hybrid learning. there I've seen a trend. Most global platforms are mostly self-learning driven with some AI intervention, and most of the edtech companies, at least in our industry, have a lot of emphasis on some kind of live angle. Simplilearn in particular, we lead with a live. Our whole platform is that you get a physical classroom kind of experience learning in front of your desktop or your mobile device. So that's the second hybrid learning discussion that I have seen playing on. The third is also about, it's not that commonly used, but we talk a lot about it internally within Simplilearn, is that training which is conceptual, where you're explaining certain concept and helping people understand that concept, versus helping people work on certain assignment and projects. So I would say conceptual versus hands-on project-based learning. There also sometimes hybrid word is used.
That was a really enriching session. May I now call upon Mr. Rajendra Singh Pawar, Chairman and Co-founder NIIT Group, and Professor Prakash Gopalan, President NIIT University, for the official launch of the third cohort of the Founders Growth Camp.
We have to go ahead and see who are the right people whom we can groom for the growth camp that is scheduled to be held at the university between the 3rd and 5th of April. We are all looking forward to the startups that are selected for this purpose. And I think soon in time to come, we will notify them of what is to be done next. And I think on that note, I would like to thank all of these gentlemen for having taken time off from their schedules to make this summit.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very warm good afternoon to all of you. I'm Neha Tiwari, and it is my privilege to welcome you all on behalf of NIIT University's Center for Innovation, Incubation and Entrepreneurship. It is truly wonderful to see you all gathered online for the 4th EdTech Growth Summit by NIIT. This summit is a key initiative under NIIT Group's EdTech Growth Program designed to empower and support promising EdTech startup founders on their growth journeys. Through this program, early-stage EdTech innovators gain access to a thriving ecosystem nurtured by NIIT Group, an institution that has played a pivotal role in shaping India's IT skilling industry over the last 4 decades. A crucial aspect of this initiative is the active involvement of NIIT University's bright students who contribute to organizing and managing this event under the guidance of faculty mentors. The overwhelming response to our previous 3 editions in 2022, 2023, and 2024 is a testament to the program's impact. Across these years, we have invited 26 promising EdTech startups to participate in our Founders Growth Camp, which has led to significant and positive outcomes for their growth and success. At NIIT University, we firmly believe that entrepreneurship fosters innovative business strategies, global market perspectives, and cutting-edge technologies that can drive meaningful change. This EdTech growth program embodies our academic philosophy's focus on industry-academia synergy. Today, we have an exciting lineup of events, including insightful keynote addresses, dynamic panel discussions, and engaging fireside chats. With that, I would now like to invite Professor Prakash Gopalan, President of NIIT University, to formally welcome our esteemed dignitaries.
To welcome all the dignitaries, the speakers and the audience, and the people in the innovation space, in the EdTech innovation space, to this fourth EdTech Growth Summit that is happening this afternoon. On behalf of the university, I would like to say that of the 4 core principles that the university has, 2 of them happen to be industry linked, and the other one being research driven. These 2 core principles have let us kind of unleash all the student fury into the industrial world in a manner that one can imagine that over the last 15 years that the university has been standing, we have had 16 startups that have come from no less than 62 ideas that went into that innovation space. Of these, I am really happy to state that 2 of the startups have received awards from none other than the Prime Minister of this country. So it in a very, very big manner reinforces the commitment that we have towards innovation at large. I would like you to know that this being the 4th in the past 3 summits that have happened, there have been no less than about 123 founders who registered with us in the first Growth Summit in 2022. 178 was the number in the second Growth Summit, and that climbed to 264 founders registering with us in the third summit. And this has been growing with time. I would like you to know that while we are the academic partners for this, we have stood in organizing the growth camp that follows this event, for which we select people from this very growth summit that happens every year. In the past 3 years, 9 in 2 of the years and 8 of the founders have been invited to these growth camps. So you have to understand it's a very, very competitive process that we take you through. These growth camps and the summits have had Microsoft as one of the technology partners since the very beginning. This year, I'm happy to announce that the Google Cloud has also joined in as one of the technology partners for us. At the previous growth summits, we have had a number of eminent speakers, and of those, I would like to name a few prominent ones: Ashwin Damera, Sanjeev Bikhchandani, Siddharth Pai, Shraddha Sharma, Alak Pandey, Avni Davda, Kunal Behel, Mohan Lakham Raju, Sajid Pai, Ryan Wiles, and Krishna Kumar. So this list is very impressive and is indicative of the kind of people who come to these summits and make their presence felt. So to all the participants, there is a very, very good afternoon opening up. I would like you to get involved in a manner that we would like to see you at the growth camp as and when it happens between the 9th and 11th of April this year at NIIT University in Neemrana. So I take this pleasure of once again inviting you to that camp as well as to this summit, and may you all have a very productive afternoon. Over to Neha.
Thank you, sir. It is my privilege to invite Mr. Rajendra Singh Pawar, Chairman and co-founder of NIIT Group, to address us today. Mr. Pawar, a distinguished leader and Padma Bhushan recipient, has played a crucial role in building India's IT landscape. I now invite Mr. Pawar to share his insights and deliver the opening remarks.
Thank you, Neha. And once again, a very hearty welcome to all our young Edtech startup founders, co-founders, team members. I eagerly look forward to this event because it gives me a chance to remember our younger days and, of course, to be inspired by the level of energy that we see happening in this space. So, since we last met, the world has changed in many fundamental ways. Many different dimensions. So, geopolitics, I can't remember a year in which so much is happening which could change the course of history, whether it's the US or it's the Middle East or Europe, parts of Asia, India, China. Very dramatic situations developing. And not the first time that things are developing, and I think it will change the course of history. But that's not the topic for today. We'll keep it for another day. Today we want to talk about, between all of us, something which is, I wouldn't say equally disruptive, but equally foundational. And that is the escalating impact of Gen AI as the whole idea unfolds. The very short period of about, little over 2 years. So I'm just coming back from a conference, which was the 21st edition of Confluence, as we call it, in the US, where NIIT Learning Systems Limited, our company, invites our speakers from about 100 Fortune 1000 companies that we have as our customers. And the whole theme was built around Gen AI. But what's interesting is, even compared to last year's Confluence, and of course the year before that, 2 years ago, very few people, very few of our customers were looking at embracing Gen AI for learning. Last year, we saw a lot of people with strong intent. And this year, not a single presentation of their work went past us without very interesting examples of the use of Gen AI in learning. Now, it's not just learning. I think the world of work is changing. That's what we need to understand. All of us who are involved in learning need to understand that. The world of work is changing dramatically. Many parts of work, as we have done it, are kind of vanishing, but a whole new set of things are emerging, which mean that learning has to adapt, learning has to change. Who we teach about what is changing dramatically. And that, of course, is the focus of our attention. That is the focus of our interest. And our attempt today also will be to share as many of those things as possible. And it's for this reason that we decided that the keynote this year should have an interesting headline, and the topic is that AI changes everything. And I've invited our CEO, Mr. Sapnesh Lala. He runs NIIT Learning System, which is the international business, and is also on the board of NIIT Limited, which is the India side, India-China business. Sapnesh has been instrumental in moving the company rapidly into the space of Gen AI. And so I'm looking forward to listening to him speak a little more. He was also in the conference, of course, but then the research team we have, which is based in Chicago, which is working on Gen AI for learning. He has deep involvement and oversight and guides that. So we will listen to that. I'm looking forward to that. And then we have two excellent panels. The first panel features young startups who are looking at the whole question of the challenges at that stage of the enterprise. Some are a little ahead of the others, so we get a series of examples of very early stage, middle stage, and then developing stage, but early stage founders. And that session will be handled and managed by Mr. Ravi Garkipati. He is the ex-CTO of Flipkart, who was there before all of these people. And then he's a venture capitalist himself, and now getting into an interesting entrepreneurial phase himself. So he will conduct this discussion and, of course, keep adding a lot of value from his own experience. And he's a great one for technology. The second panel features large and successful learning companies in India. We've heard some things from them last year and the year before that. So to keep abreast of what they are seeing happen and how they are dealing with scaling with sustainability. That becomes the next phase for all of us, as we know. And they will share their experiences. They will share the challenges they faced in the last 12 months and how they overcame those challenges. And this session is moderated by a veteran in the field, Mr. Anand Sudarshan. Some of you or many of you would know of him. After many years in the IT industry, he was heading the Manipal education systems initiatives on for-profit education internationally, was involved in all kinds of transactions, setting up institutions abroad, introducing technology extensively into many aspects of the overall Manipal system, and has invested in startups, is already mentoring many startups. And so he's dealt with the startup phase, he's dealt with scaling, and we are looking forward to his moderating the three great panelists and their conversation, and of course, adding his bit for the benefit of all of us who are listening in today. And then there's a fireside chat. We always look forward to getting a veteran. And this time we have Rajan Anandan. Everybody knows him. Not just from the time that he was in Google, but before that he was Microsoft in India. He was running Google in this part of the world, and now is at peak 15 partners, making big investments in all fields, but quite obviously looking at the possibilities for in the future for the whole startup phenomena, the high growth company phenomena, the whole digital ecosystem, particularly at a time like this. And he will be in conversation with my co-founder, Vijay Thadani. Vijay joining in from the US. So they will be in discussion. And that should be another very promising session that I'm personally looking forward to in the challenges of today, in the very, very, I would say, hyperactive financial environment in the world, driven not just by the geopolitics, but also by the disruptions that technology is bringing. So how to look at investments in this time, how to look at managing companies in this time. I think there'll be many good things to look at in that session. Now, I do want to mention that we have an audience, a large audience, but we want to make sure that your questions are woven in. So be as active as you can on putting your questions into the chat box, and then the moderators and the speakers will try and respond to them as they come. So that's the format. And then, of course, in the end, we'll have Professor Gopalan, who's our host, the Vice Chancellor of the university. And he did make a mention of the growth camp, but we'll have him conclude the session by talking about the growth camp. Just a few views from my side on what I saw at this recent customer conference, Confluence of NIIT. And before that, a couple of weeks before that, I was also at the conference which is done by ASU, the Arizona State University and GSV partners in India. They did their third conference this year for startups. That was, of course, across many sectors, but education was the focus. And again, a very large audience of people at all levels, but also from all sectors of education. So it was schools and colleges and so on. Whereas our thrust in our event is mainly on Edtech for the consumer market and for corporates. Slightly different. But there too we saw, and I was quite impressed to see the continuing interest in this sector, in spite of the many challenges the sector has had over the last few years post the COVID spurt, but a lot more interest, reasonable amount in Gen AI, but I think also in different aspects of how learning through technology is becoming more and more pervasive, how it's spreading into the whole supply chain of learning, and the interest of a lot of bright young people to look at this space in spite of the challenges it has had. In the US event, our Confluence event, where normally we get 70 to 80 companies. This year we had 110 participants, the record. And they come from the Fortune 1000, from the banking sector, the insurance sector, the pharma sector, the manufacturing, of course, oil and gas. And so it's a fairly wide representation. We learned quite a bit about the concerns about the shifting nature of work, about the impact that is expected from Gen AI, is demanded from Gen AI, because the challenges of the corporate world everywhere are becoming similar. And I think there is an expectation that the productivity gains that all corporations are looking for, which are becoming a pressure for the learning sector as well. How to get more productivity from learning at this point in time, and what role can Gen AI play in that? Now, of course, we do know that for many of these sectors, like the banking sector, the oil and gas sector, compliance is a very big issue. And people are finding a lot more pressure on compliance from the regulators. So what can Gen AI do to deal with those kind of not so productive aspects of learning, but necessary aspects of learning? And therefore, how to find funds to look at the impact of the changing nature of work. If many kinds of jobs are vanishing because of Gen AI, then the big question was, okay, you have agentic AI, and you have agents. And an interesting conversation that managers will have to now learn how not just to manage workers, but to learn digital workers. And the big question was that the digital workers, will they be trained by the IT folks or the HR folks? So many interesting perspectives emerging, but good discussions on changing nature of work, some work shrinking, some new things coming up. And there was a range of emotions. There were the pragmatists, or let's say, the more optimistic people who said that this is not the first time technology is changing things, and some new things will show up. And everybody talks about the example of from horseback to motors and so on and so forth. And then there were people who were being a little more concerned, not just with the extent of change, but rather the pace of change. The concern was whether we can adjust fast enough to create jobs in this environment. So all of these are issues, I'm sure, which are on the minds of our startups today. And if not, they should be, because we can't now take for granted that here is a need which we saw last year, and how do we respond to that need? The needs are changing. The landscape is changing. With geopolitics, many other things will change. We will have many kind of pressures on companies, on their cost structure. They'll have many opportunities. So I think the demands of learning are also going to change quite significantly. And many of our startups, of course, are not looking at schools and such things because we don't study that. Those are more stable areas. But we look at the corporate world, we look at industry, we look at working professionals. I think there's a big wind of change there, and all of us are finding that those are issues that we need to factor in far more actively. There was a very stunning example of a project that our people are doing, our researchers are doing, with the school system in the US, and this is the backward districts. And that was about how to write better. Now, I would have thought that, well, Gen AI can write for us. But the writing revolution, as it's called, it actually talks about saying that if we can't teach our people to write well, then they will not read well. And if they don't read well, they will not think well. So deeper issues like that also are of great significance, because when we say critical thinking as a capability, it probably has to start from very fundamentals of how we read and write. And while it may look like it was aimed at school students, I found that very relevant, because in our university, which we have, and some of you have visited and some will visit, I find that our leaders in the universities are concerned about the writing skills of the young faculty who are coming in. So things are interconnected, things are changing, and I think it's easy to say that we'll solve the new problem also with Gen AI. And of course, we remain hopeful that all young people, such as yourselves, who are breaking fresh ground, will see these shifting sands and find some opportunities within those shifting sands, rather than doing what some of the other companies have done in the past, which may be becoming less and less relevant. So with that, I'd like to hand you back to Neha. I can see that Sapnesh is there, so we can start as soon as he's ready. So back to you, Neha.
Thank you, sir, for setting the perfect tone for the event. Your presence and introduction really helped to create a positive and engaging atmosphere for everyone. May I now request Mr. Pawar to introduce Mr. Sapnesh Lalla, our keynote speaker, and invite him for his keynote speech on AI changes everything. Over to you, sir.
I remember reading that line that language most shows a man, speak that I may see thee. So I leave it for Sapnesh to be introduced by what he's going to talk about, but just to say that he's very much a part of building an IIT, has been there for 3 decades. He started the whole new business model for our learning Fortune 1000 companies, and has been deeply engaged in the whole area of learning science, how we think, how we learn, and then the role of technology. But more than that, he's worked with these large corporations to understand their learning needs, and has built business models that deal with, as I said, among the Fortune 1000 companies, the top in many categories, and how to solve their talent problems using newer methods of learning. So, Sapnesh, over to you.
Thanks, Raji, and thanks everyone who's joined, I think, this amazing new edition of the Edtech conference at NU. Welcome all of you. I think I've been asked to discuss how AI can change everything. I can tell you with great confidence that AI will change everything. How you will use it to change everything is really up to you and up to all of us. Now, I can't see all of you, so I can't tell how you guys are thinking. But what I can say over the last 2.5 years of work that we have done, especially under the guidance of our Chief Learning Scientist, Dr. Greg Collins, is that there are 2 key insights that at least we have gained. And I'm sure as you work with AI, you might gain more insights. The 2 insights that I wanted to share that we have gained, and that you might be used readily as you look at solving problems are one, with Gen AI, you can impersonate anyone, which means you can use Gen AI to play the role of anyone that you can think of. Now that could help you solve many problems. If I could see you, and if this was an interactive session, I would have asked you what might be situations where you use Gen AI to impersonate someone who is hard for you to get when you are building your learning programs. One that I wish I always had was a subject matter expert. It was very, very hard for me when I was growing up as an instructional developer to find access to subject matter experts. With Gen AI, you can impersonate subject matter experts. So you should think of what you could do. Another area where I used to have trouble when I was building programs was, how do I build really good role plays? Role plays tend to be really, really important means of training somebody on how to do something. For example, if you're teaching somebody how to sell, or if you're teaching somebody how to buy, or if you're teaching somebody how to give feedback, or if you're teaching soft skills, if you're teaching somebody how to ask a set of questions and what to do with the answers that the person provided. Having that somebody at that point in time becomes really, really important. And I think one of the things we've learned with Gen AI is that you can get Gen AI to impersonate that person. So imagine if you wanted to do a role play where there is a buyer and then there is a seller. And let's say our student is playing the role of a seller. Now, without Gen AI, it's really hard to create a credible interaction between a buyer and a seller. You have to find a buyer. You have to create a situation where the conversation between the buyer and the seller appears credible. And you have to find a method of having someone observe that conversation so that they can provide feedback. And that becomes really, really hard even if you're running an instructor-led training class. In e-learning, it becomes even harder. But with Gen AI and its ability to enable you to impersonate anyone, you can actually do it. So it enables you to do things that you could not do in the past. So that's one key insight that we gain, that with Gen AI, you could impersonate anyone. There is a second key insight that we gain, and this you could think of as a generalization of the first insight. Learning and especially education, as we think of today, even today, or how education has been practiced over the last millennia. The practice of education has been designed around constraints. And let's look at what constraints mean. There is a reason why you have, now I know NU has great student-teacher ratio, sometimes as low as 10 to 12, but you have 12 students to one teacher. Now, why is that? Why couldn't we have one teacher to one student? It's really because there is a constraint on how many teachers we can have. Now, if some of you were elite athletes, you might have 5 or 6 coaches to yourself, but that's super expensive. For an average Joe, even if there was a 1:10, 1:20 teacher-student ratio, they do pretty well. But what if you could remove this constraint of having one teacher instruct 15, 20 students? You could remove that constraint with Gen AI. Another constraint we typically have is, one person writes a book and thousands of people read that book. The book does not change based on the person who's reading it. The book got written by the author. You end up reading the same book. Same thing is true with newspapers. Same thing is true with magazines. Coming closer to training, the same course is designed and delivered to large number of students. Now, imagine if that constraint could go away. Imagine you could create and deliver a course that was designed, developed, and delivered to just one person. Think with Gen AI, you can do that. Now, these are not just the constraints that education and training works with. With e-learning, you could remove the location constraint. But with Gen AI, you can remove a whole multitude of constraints that plague education and can design interactions that are not hindered by constraints, but take advantage of the technology to deliver learning interventions that really, really create value. Now, there is a famous 2 sigma problem that Bloom talked about. And Bloom said that in terms of learning outcomes could be 2 sigma better if there was individualized coaching that was available to every student, as compared to one student being one of several who got the same instruction. So just the move from being one of several to just the one person getting coached by an expert instructor, there would be a 2 sigma change in learning outcomes. With AI, you can achieve that at scale. You could create an expert coach for everyone who needs it. Heck, instead of one coach, you could create 5 coaches. Like, you might know tennis players who have a mental wellness coach, a physical fitness coach, a serving coach, a volleying coach, a return coach. Like that, you could think of creating learning experiences that really, really help a student better different parts of who they are, so that they are able to achieve outcomes when they matter. So with those 2 outcomes, with those 2 insights, with just those 2 insights, we are able to imagine a number of different ways in which we can make learning outcomes better. Of course, something that many of you would have looked at is, it becomes a lot easier to build learning content. Now, what if you could build content that made sense only to one person? So let's say you wanted to create a course, again, on how to use Python. Yeah. Let's say you wanted to create a course on how to use Python. Now, the typical way of creating a course would be, you would say, you would pick a class of audience. You could choose to teach Python to find final year students in an engineering program. You could create Python to people who want to become data analysts. You could teach Python to someone who's working in domain, maybe financial services, and wants to do analytics of financial data. You could teach them Python. So you could pick an audience, a class of audience, and then build a generic program for them. Now, if you were to think of how AI can help, one thing that AI can do, like I pointed out, was remove the constraint that causes you to create one course for many. You could create a course for every student. And instead of creating it and making it ready and be available, you could create it on the fly. So the more you think about just these two insights, you come up with scenarios where you can dramatically improve the training outcomes that you could create for your students. Now, I could go on and on and on. What could be really, really cool is if you think of constraints that you are facing as founders, whether the constraint is in building learning programs that create great outcomes, whether it is in finding students who might be interested in learning programs. For example, it's possible that for a lot of you, having salespeople who could have interesting conversations about what a student could achieve with your programs could be an interesting constraint. How can AI solve that constraint? For some of you who might be trying to market your programs, figuring out what messages work for which student or which type of student might be an interesting challenge for AI to look at. So as you think through the journey that a student might take with you, starting from receiving a message from you to participating in your programs, paying for them, consuming your programs, and then maybe for some of them, after consuming their programs, they might be interested in finding jobs for which your programs got them ready. What could AI do to help them find a job? Can AI help them by impersonating an expert recruiter? So there are many areas that I think you could choose. Look, I have more audience to participate in this program. Even these guys got interested in AI. But in any case, where I was going with that was, I think it's really for you to imagine how you can use AI to remove the constraints that you operate in, and how you can use AI to release you from several of these constraints and create interactions, create learning programs, create a business that is dramatically different from what it could be. Thank you.
So, Sapnesh, we have a little time, and I thought maybe I can nudge you a bit to comment on a few things, particularly some of the things we saw at the Confluence last week. What comes to you top of mind as something that you hadn't thought of, which somebody presented that they were doing with GenAI?
Something that we had dabbled with, but we had not really thought about was, there were a number of life sciences and pharma companies who are our customers and who participated in Confluence. Almost all pharma companies have one very big constraint. They spend billions of dollars on R&D to come up with a molecule that might help with a disease. So, they spend billions upon billions of dollars to come up with a new drug. Now, most of the times, it's not just one pharma company who's trying to fix a problem. So let's say if it was Ozempic, where Novo Nordisk got the patent for Ozempic. There are many companies who were in that race. Novo Nordisk got to the finish line, completed the trials, got FDA approval to be able to market their drug. Now, once you reach that point where you have approval, they register a patent and they have what you could call regulatory exclusivity for a short period of time. In that period of time, they have to recover all the money that they spent on R&D and more so that they can get profit. So that's one. So they work in constraints where they have to get the drug launched and in healthcare providers' hands, doctors' hands, as soon as they can, because every minute that they lose where the drug is not with the patient, they are losing money, and that could determine whether their efforts on creating a drug end up being profitable or not. So this period of time where between the drug being ready to launch and being prescribed to patients is a pressure cooker. The more you can compress it, the more you can expand the lifetime or the shelf life of that drug. Now, typically what happens is, and this phase in a pharma company is called commercialization. So it moves from R&D into commercialization of the drug that they have discovered. This phase is fraught with constraints. Constraints being you need experts to be able to create training. And I'm focusing only from the lens of training. I'm not going beyond training. From the point of view of training, this phase is fraught with constraints. You need experts who have worked on the drug, who are intimately aware of the drug, to help you build programs that you could use to train the salespeople, to train the medical experts who are going to talk to doctors who are not salespeople, but are experts who will help doctors understand when to prescribe the drug, how to prescribe the drug, who to prescribe the drug to. You need doctors to understand when to prescribe the drug. You need healthcare providers to figure out how to stock the drug, how to administer the drug to patients. You need patients to understand what are the pros and cons of the drug, what are the side effects of the drugs. You need economic negotiators who negotiate with hospitals on how to position this drug vis-a-vis other alternatives that a healthcare provider might have, so that they are able to get the right price for the drug. So there are many roles to train on something which is very complex, very technical in nature. And there are very, very few people who know about this because of obvious reasons. When a drug is in R&D, it is in no one's interest for a lot of people to know about it because it's a secret. And so this has been a process which typically is like a pressure cooker. And several of our customers said that, look, if AI can liberate us from constraints, even constraints of a subject matter expert, or constraints where we can enable our salespeople to practice the conversations that they're likely to have, let's say with doctors or with healthcare providers, that would be of immense value. And they said, what if we started using AI all the way from the time a drug is in R&D to the time it comes out into commercialization, and use AI to train different roles, use AI to train R&D engineers or R&D pharma experts when it's in R&D to manufacturing to the commercialization phase, and use that knowledge to be able to train different stakeholders. So that was something which we were dabbling with. It is a key area of interest for our pharma customers, but we felt through discussion that if we were to really apply AI to this problem, we may have a solution that could do a lot of good.
The other thing which we heard a lot, not only this year but to some extent last year as well, which may be very relevant to our participants, is that we when we go about planning our business to train, we look at the kind of roles for which we have to train. And I think this shifting nature of work is changing or may make many roles irrelevant. So I think there was a much bigger discussion on skills and micro skills. And so therefore, as against the talent inventory, there was the whole question of skills inventory. We want to throw some light because that starts changing how we should plan our business, how we should check. So there were many interesting presentations on that, and I thought you may have insights, which again can be very useful for people planning a business. That are you planning to build programmers, or are you doing something else which may apply to different roles as they change, or the changing roles?
You're very right, Raji. What became very clear is that there are a lot of roles that will change quite significantly in their content. It's also quite clear that some of the roles may just go away, and they may just not be needed because AI or automation could address those roles. And this has happened in the past, but with AI, it could happen more rapidly. For example, if you were to think of adoption of automobiles, it took many decades for the world to achieve very high adoption of automobiles. A lot of horses went out of business because of that. But if you were to think of roles today and how having a clearer idea of skills that enable a person to do a role could be very beneficial. For example, if you were to look at a retail bank, there are many retail banks in India. Likewise, many retail banks who have branches all over the world. For example, we work with a number of retail banks in the United States, including Bank of America and Wells Fargo. Likewise, in India, we work with retail banks such as HDFC, ICICI Bank, Axis Bank, and so on and so forth. Now, all of the management in banks are very aware that the number of days in which you will have tellers, or in US tellers who are manning drive-thrus in banks, are numbered. They know that they are numbered, but they don't know how long tellers will last. They know that the number of tellers year on year would go down. They know that the number of branches year on year would go down. Every branch has a staff. Every branch has 5 or 6 people who work at the branch. They all know that the number of people in those branches would go down. Now, the interesting thing is that as you think of career development or career change, just as there are roles that are diminishing in size and volume, there are other roles that are increasing in size and volume. So, for example, for a number of retail banks, the role of a cybersecurity first responder is increasing in size with more and more online transactions. More cyber fraud is likely to take place, and for that, you need a lot more cyber first responders. Now, if you think of it as a problem, you say, okay, it's possible that a lot of tellers will get fired and a lot of cybersecurity first responders will get hired. That's one way of solving that problem. The way that some of our customers, however, are looking at it is to decompose the role of a teller into skills that they might have. For example, a teller will have customer service skills. A teller will be able to look at a customer's account and see what's going on. And a teller might even be able to advise what they should or should not do with the money that they have in the account. A teller will be able to tell if there are suspicious transactions that are going on in the account, because they know how to look up an account. So these are a few skills that a teller has. Now, if you were to think of what are the different skills that a cyber first responder in a bank might have, they will need customer service skills because that's who they need to talk to and help. They will need skills to identify fraudulent activity. They will have to have that nose to see, to figure out what's going on that is not right. They will probably also need technical skills to figure out what might have caused that activity and was that cybercrime. So as you think about it, and I just touched upon a few of the key skills, but if you think about what I was doing here, I was decomposing a role into skills and then trying to see if there were common skills across two different roles. But by doing that, what we can do is, as L&D professionals, is to create a path from a teller to a cybersecurity first responder and create a learning journey for folks who might want a career change from being a teller into a cybersecurity first responder. And that becomes very valuable both for a bank, but also for the guy who is a teller today, where they may have anxiety on their job going away. So there are a number of areas where you can apply the concept of skills and how different skills come together to enable a person to do a role in, for example, solving career development problems or solving talent problems where you need to figure out whether to hire lateral new talent versus reskill existing talent to be able to take care of a role that might be surging.
So we have a couple of minutes, maybe 5 minutes. So let me just pose one more question, because we talked about the process of designing and delivering learning, and then we talked about the nature of work. So bigger question, I think, for all of us involved in the business is, what does this change mean in terms of building up or retaining a profitability in the business? If many things are going to be done almost free, and if it's going to be possible for more and more people to do these things, including our customers, then what's the way to look at profitability, viability, sustainability with all these changes that are happening? And that's because that's the motive of every business. We have to be sustainable. So in what sense is sustainability going to be in challenge, and what are some of the thoughts to deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, to me, and this is really an adaptation of something, Raji, that you have always said. You've always said that the brand is the residual of an interaction between a person who offers something and a person who consumes something. So it's the residual that's left out after a transaction about a service or a product gets done. My adaptation of that is that profit is the residual of the value that a customer wants to share with the provider of a service or a product. So the more value that a customer sees from a transaction, often the more profit they are able to share with the provider of service. The lower the value, the lower is the profit that a customer allows the provider of the product or a service to retain. I think that in a steady state has been a reasonable equation as I've thought about profit. The higher the value, the higher is the customer's desire or ability to share value as profit with the provider. So it's really dependent on the perception of value in the eyes of the customer on how much profit they are ready to leave with you. Now, profit is the life and blood of a business. A business without profit for an elongated period of time is not really a business. You can choose to call it whatever else you want to call it, but it's certainly not a business. So now, I think what you are asking is, in this environment that is changing so rapidly, how should we think about profit? How should we figure out how to deal with profit? I would go back to that. Now it's not easy because things are changing so rapidly. There used to be a time when we often had discussions with Shell where they do their planning in 50-year chunks, because when you explore and find an oil field, you spend billions of dollars in drilling, finding oil, pulling oil out of the ground, refining it, building refineries, refining it, and then bringing it to consumers. So that's a 50-year horizon. I think in many businesses, the horizon and the need for a product, the value that a product brings, is shrinking quite dramatically. So I think most businesses can't build business models which are static in nature, even for a year and a half. The needs of customers or clients are going to continuously change. So, for example, I think this might be relevant to folks in this meeting. Way back, publishers used to contract with authors. The authors would write a book, and the book would be the textbook, and the textbook would continue for several years. Textbooks could continue for decades. I remember when I was going to high school, there was a book in physics called by David Spires. We studied it. I went for a reunion after 20 years to my school, and high school kids were still learning from that textbook. Now, I don't think publishers can rely on that business model anymore. Now, that may create nuggets of learning for our friends who are running Edtechs, where the way you are delivering programs, where you thought that one program would service thousands upon thousands of students, the days of that might be gone. The days of creating learning materials as an investment might be gone. The days might be where you create learning materials for the student who is likely to show up tomorrow. So you start thinking of creating learning materials just in time. So we'll have to adapt in a very significant way. Now, for many, this might sound strange that I'm going to be an edtech or I'm going to be a learning company without a catalog. You could have a catalog, but you don't need to have things in inventory. That's what Amazon did. That's what many retailers did, where they took inventory out of the equation. I remember way back, the key differentiator of Dell was that they would start manufacturing the computer when they had the order, as compared to manufacturing lots of them waiting for orders. So a lot of these things would upend business practices and put strains on how we make profit. But I think for founders, it'll be important to think ahead on what changes are likely to happen, how they can use innovation and technology to cause change, and to create differentiation, both from a cost perspective as well as a market perspective. And then say, how would they create and sustain profitability? How can they bring value to customers so that the customers will allow them to make money?
Thank you. I think that's been very educative. So we're just on time, maybe a little ahead. So back to you, Neha, and thanks, Sapnesh. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your insightful thoughts. Up next, we have an engaging panel discussion on what are the challenges that early stage founders face. I'm delighted to introduce our esteemed panelists, Mr. Loveleen Bhatia, co-founder of Edureka, a leading online learning platform. Under his visionary leadership, Edureka has transformed tech education by equipping learners worldwide with industry-relevant skills. Then we have Mr. Shronit Ladhani, founder of LearnTube, an innovative platform leveraging AI to enhance education. His vision is reshaping how learners access and engage with knowledge in the digital space. Mr. Yashwardhan Burad, a co-founder of Exio Job Private Limited, a platform dedicated to upskilling and career transformation. His efforts have played a crucial role in bridging the gap between education and employment. To moderate this insightful discussion, we have Mr. Anand Sudarshan, founder and director of Sylvant Advisors, which provides strategic advisory services in the education sector to institutions, enterprises, and investors. In addition to incubating and investing in startups, Mr. Sudarshan has made notable contributions to Manipal Education, where he served as CEO and managing director, driving key initiatives that elevated its academic offerings. He has also been a board member at NIT since 2012. Before we start, may I request the audience to type their questions in the chat box. Our panelists will address them at the end of the session. May I now invite Mr. Sudarshan and our esteemed panelists to begin this session.
Thank you, Neha. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, my fellow panelists. It's a pleasure and honor to be here back again at the Edtech Growth Summit. And it's an absolute pleasure to be with all of you. And I look forward to learning some new things today from all of you, as indeed I'm sure the audience is waiting with bated breath as well. So we will dive deep, straight in. Very quickly, 30 seconds on the structure that we all discussed and agreed. I'm going to start off one after the other, asking a basic question, which directly addresses the topic. And then we will take it from there and convert it into an interactive conversation. We will have that for about 25 minutes or so. That will give us sufficient time to allocate about 10 minutes or so at the end for both answering questions and maybe a minute within that to wrap things up. Is that okay? Yeah, good. So the topic that's given today is what are the challenges startup founders face? I'm just going to modify that just a little bit because every founder, early stage founder every founder goes through an early stage. So I'm going to change that a little bit to say what are the challenges that a founder faces during early stage, because these challenges keep changing as you grow and scale the company forward, I suppose, but we essentially mean the same thing. So I'm going to start off with that. To do that, one request I have for all of you is to step back, go back in history and reflect upon your own, early days as founders, and just start answering the question. I'm going to start with you, Lovely. And I'm just going to ask you to just focus on two, when you throw yourself back to your early stages and you started Edureka, what are the top two challenges that as a founder at early stage that you faced and why?
Sure. Thanks, Anand. And thank you, everyone. So, Anand, this question, right, which I'm going to answer now is based on my journey as well as based on a lot of experience I gained with fellow founders across. There's not specific to EdTech, right? Based on all the investments I've been making for the last 10 odd years, right, 30 odd people. I think the first one, in my opinion, is figuring out the business model itself, right? While this may sound a little counterintuitive, but if you're building for the first time, right, you need quite some time to figure out the right business model. Many times it takes a few months also to figure out what you're building. In my journey itself, it took us a year and a half to actually figure out what are we doing here, right? And in startups, right, you have to act fast. So sometimes you kind of pick up one thing and just keep going towards it. But I think there is a difference between being fast and being in haste. So that's what I advise a lot of people, that be fast. Jaldi karo, jaldbazi mat karo, if I can use Hindi there. I think that's one, that you need to be patient about figuring out the right business model. Second thing, which is, I mean, I'm sure all of us will agree to, is hiring the right team. Especially initially, getting the first few hires in your company is not easy, right? If you worked earlier, you have that brand to hire people. When you become a founder, you have nothing, right? When you start. So the first few hires are very key to your success or failure. I mean, you may not fail, but it may put you back by a few years. So these are the two things I believe, right? Be patient about finding the right business model. Don't burn all your resources with one thing. Take your time. And second, hiring the right team.
Right. Just a quick clarification on the second one, and I'll come back to the first one later.
Yeah.
Is when you said you have to figure out hire your right team. Did that start off with we can't use the word hiring, but finding your fellow founders as well? Was that a process, or was that an organic process? You really didn't have to worry about it, and then the hiring of the team was a founding team, if I can call it that, which is a little different from founders.
Right. So in my case, from day one, I had a co-founder. So it was not a challenge for me. But I think with a lot of companies I've invested in, that is also one of the bigger things, right? I mean, a co-founder is like your spouse, right? You end up spending so many years and you have to go through all sorts of difficult times. So I think that is very, very important. And I would say there's a lot of luck also there, which plays a role when you get to the right people. I mean, there's no formula to get the right co-founder.
Right. So fortune has a role to play.
Yes, definitely.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Lovely. I'm going to ask the same question to you, Shronit, now. Lovely said, figuring out the business model, which can sometimes take several months. In his case, took a year and a half. And he talked about, finding the right team, and in some instances, starting with finding the right founder or co-founders, it could be, are the two challenges that, top challenges that come to his mind. Now, in your journey, have these two been important? And if you can go beyond these two and then add your two to this list.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree with Lovely. And thanks, Anand, for the question, and NIIT for organizing this. There are a bunch of challenges, right? I think in an entrepreneur's life, I don't even think it stops with early stage. But team definitely being one. For me, it was co-founder, right? So, and I don't know if you remember this, but very early days when we were starting up, Anand, I'd met you for getting your insights as well. So for me, it was more of, hey, there is a problem. I am itching to solve this problem. I haven't found a co-founder yet. I spent, I think, a good 6 odd months or 9 months looking, and at the same time meeting people like you. And a lot of them said, hey, if you really have a problem that people want a solution for, see if you can solve it regardless. Don't wait. In my journey, what ended up happening is I then just started up without a co-founder. Originally as Career Ninja, and then as we pivoted into LearnTube, going back to what Loveleen said, right? Your co-founder is like, for me, my co-founder is my spouse. So as we pivoted into LearnTube, Gargi was the very skill set that I was looking for at work as well. And it made just sense for us to sort of build that from there on together. But I would say I probably spent a good 9 months trying to figure out how to start. Um, and then because I started without a co-founder, we got some early traction, which attracted the right founding team in, which that then enabled us to sort of solidify, let's say, the team composition in a way, right? So that was one challenge definitely for us. Second, again, being a cliche one, is of course fundraising. In our case, again, I think the first time we had interest in a term sheet, the investor from the US flew in to Bombay to meet me. I thought I really need to impress the investor, so I took him for coffee to a fancy hotel. I think the investor judged me and thought probably this is how I live, and the deal didn't work out for various reasons. And then the second time, I got into a situation where the investors were probably not being very fair in the structuring. So that deal broke off. And the third one, just before COVID, got stuck because of COVID. So I think we faced a bunch of challenges to get our first round going. Looking back, I think we got lucky because the kind of set of investors we have today, we did not at that point. And the kind of support we got because of that would it definitely not have been the same, but was definitely, I think, in the first year and a half, the most, let's say, painful experiences came because of the fundraise.
Interesting. So, two things you've said. You're saying you had different experiences from finding the right co-founder perspective between Career Ninja and LearnTube. Contextually, there were different problems, different solutions for different problems, and it kind of worked out well. But it was indeed, I'm just now separating out the problem as Loveleen just stated, which is in terms of the team. And I'm just looking at what you said and focusing more on the founder part of it. And second, of course, is getting your first funding, and that's an interesting process, and we'll come back to that. And I want you to just reflect on it, and when I come back to you, talk about what is it that startup founders can, at startup stage founders can be prepared for, or what they ought to be prepared for when they are looking for, based on your experience. Don't take them to a 5-star hotel. Coffee shop is one, but more than that, what else do they need to be prepared for? Yash, I'll come to you now. So there are 4 which you've heard. I'm sure you're noted down. And same question to you. Startup stage as a founder, what are the? Do you agree with these 4? And what are the 2 that you're going to add to this list?
Sure, absolutely. Thanks, Anand. Thanks, NIIT, for having me here. Right, absolutely agree with all the 4 mentioned. Right, a few of them fortunate enough that I didn't have to face a few of those problems, like actually getting a co-founder. In my case, it happened organically. It was my batchmate, friend, flatmate for probably 8 years. So it just happened organically that we ended up starting up together, and that level of trust and was established, and that problem got resolved fortunately. But absolutely agree, a very tough problem to have. And a lot of my friends who are now starting up do keep pinging me that can you help me find a co-founder, can you help me find a CTO? I'm like, dude, that's the toughest problem to solve. I can't really help you with that. Right, and absolutely agree with Loveleen's point. And in fact, one of the problems which I was going to, and challenges which I was going to talk about, was pretty similar, I would say. Finding a business model, or I would say rather getting to product market fit, right? Absolutely biggest challenge. And I think when we reflect, when like me and my co-founders reflect, we call it like my idea will change the world syndrome is how entrepreneurs start, right? Like this is the problem and I have a solution, and it is going to transform the world from here. And you just get into building a product, an MVP, it is going to solve it. So you essentially start pitching to the stakeholders rather than learning from the stakeholders and the market first, that what is the shape and form in which the solution is actually going to work out, right? And I think this is a typical journey which every entrepreneur initially goes through, because they start off with so much passion around their own idea, right? And I think for us also, the initial year and a half was equally tricky, where we had an idea where we thought that this will democratize job opportunities for all tier 2, tier 3 college students, and let me push this to all hundreds of colleges in our country. And then when you're on the ground pitching to colleges, placement cells, directors, you realize the challenges there. And it's a tough pill to swallow initially for a first time entrepreneur, I would say. And but the market teaches you at the end of it, and you realize that you really need to make something that they want, not something which you really want to push into the market, right? So I think that's the first challenge which I believe every entrepreneur will go through. And even if you get that advice, it is difficult to absorb it when you are in that time frame and in that period where you feel, no, this is actually solving the problem. Why do you feel where the gap is, right? And I think that is the first challenge which I feel is extremely tricky, and getting to that product market fit is a journey. It's a journey in itself, right? I think that is one. The second challenge I wanted to talk about, and I think we're still early stage, 6-ish years of building AccioJob for us, right? So, and just when I entered the panel, there was Sapnesh talking about how businesses get static, right? And there is no place for businesses which get static in the current ecosystem. And absolutely agreed. And it's a challenge which we faced, right? 2.5, 3 years into the journey of building, thinking we have product market fit, achieving some scale, and then being totally absorbed in the BAU activities, running the business, looking at day-to-day metrics, moving them. I think you have a set piece template and targets you're trying to chase, where you really need to find that that time which you spend with the customers and reflect back to actually understand how the market and the needs of the customer are evolving, right? And especially for us as edtech entrepreneurs during the COVID phase, I think there's been a lot of need change or customer demand change over the last few years, right? And being able to adapt, innovate, preempt, and anticipate, I would say, how the customers' needs are changing. That's a challenge for an entrepreneur, right? And in hindsight, when you actually envisage that what really happened and why the changes I am making are working now, that is the time when you realize that, okay, this is what I should have been looking at, and that should be a focus area of actually spending time to reflect on how the customer is changing, right? I think these would be like two big challenges, but 100% agree. Hiring a team, absolutely difficult. Uh, Extremely, like, the initial team is the team where you want to be absolutely candid and make sure the culture
Fair.
which the founders have started remains and like flows across the company.
Okay. Absolutely. So that's two more: PMF, product market fit, and adapting to rapid changes in the marketplace, especially during crazy times. Fantastic list of 6. I'm going to add two more to that, from my own experience, starting several companies and then investing in 19 companies and supporting several more, either through a conversation or much longer kind of support. How do you handle your first big fail, right? As a founder, early stage, how do you handle your first big fail? Because there will be big fails, for most people. I'm sure there are a few companies which don't have fail and just keep zipping along, but I would suspect for most companies, there would be a big fail. How do you handle it? And second is, which is I'm just going to take on from what Yash, you mentioned, which is when the market is changing rapidly, any entrepreneur is deeply in love, right? All entrepreneurs are deeply in love with their idea. And that's the confidence, that's the excitement that makes them become entrepreneurs. That's what brings the passion. But when the market changes and gives you indications that you will have to let go of that idea, either completely or substantially change, that's emotionally a very difficult thing to do. And it's something that one has to learn from. I'll just add these two, but I'm going to come back to you, Lovely, and I'm going to start with you again. We've got these things listed. Now let's talk about how does a startup founder handle all of them very quickly. The two that you mentioned, you can take any of the others as well, but let's take a couple of minutes each because we've got 9 minutes left. Quick couple of minutes each of you can take and list down how startup founders how to address them.
Sure. I think the first thing which you learn as a startup founder over a period of time is to become a little dispassionate, right? I mean, that is a key thing to learn. Handling failures is something which you will have to do, right? And the buck stops at you, right? So you have to take the complete ownership of everything. तो you have to get used to it. तो आदत सी है मुझको ऐसे जीने की types. You have to figure out that, right? So that's key. And the other, I mean, again, it stems from the fact which you asked, and Yash also put that. How do we adapt to changes, right? So, I mean, you have to be a little dispassionate, right? The thing which you start with, in all likelihood, that is not what will make you ultimately successful in your business, right? That idea, when you start, right, everything looks easy, right? You kind of build it on a whiteboard. This sab ho jayega. We will build a large business out of it. Doesn't work like that, right? And you get used to it when once you see that okay, this is not working. Everything looks very easy. I mean, since this is the English conversation, otherwise I would have used some. I don't know, but yeah, everything looks easy at start, right? But everything is very difficult to build out and then take it to the customer and then take money from them and remain profitable, right? So it is a very hard job, and the earlier you figure that out, the better it is, right? And whenever you take a new step, I mean, the challenges are never going to go away. It's what will happen is that you will get used to it. So that's how I think about it. I mean, on a few of these points, that get used to it, get a little dispassionate. Don't derive all your pleasure from your work, right? There has to be something else also which keeps you going, right? Otherwise, you will get into that rabbit hole. So that's how I'll put it.
Thank you. Very quick, but Mr. Narayanmurthy says you have to work for 90 hours, 100 hours a week. But if you don't want to derive all your pleasure from work, how is it going to work?
Everyone has their own way of thinking.
That is a little provocative
think,
just to see
I
what the
think
reaction would
startup
be. You
founders-
don't have to answer it.
Yeah, I mean, startup founders actually work more than that.
That's right.
Yeah,
I was just going to say that.
You
I
may be
just
relate.
I'm glad you said it.
You may be physically out of work, but mentally you're always thinking about it, right? So that's a given, right? And if you don't want to put in so much effort, I think there's no need to build a startup, right? That's not the only thing to be successful in life.
Fair enough. Thanks, Loveleen. Shronit, your 2 bits. And in terms of what the founders ought to be doing.
What the founders ought to be doing to solve
Manage these challenges, yeah.
So, yeah, so sort of adding to what Loveleen said, right? You either so one is yes, you got to be a little dispassionate, or in how I look at it, you just have to start thinking this too shall pass, right? The previous challenge passed, this too shall pass. It obviously is easy to say and doesn't feel like it when you're in the thick of it. But just the past reminders of how you've done that already. And the reminder to yourself, right? Like I literally, at one of the worst times, I was like, so what's the worst that can happen? Right? I started thinking. And I was like, okay, worst that can happen is you'll have to build all of this again. You will build with so much more today that you have than you had before. You have more experience, you have more connections, you have more access and more network and more brand value and so much more than when you did that before. And it is you and your core team who did that, right? So, right. So that's just a way to ground and sort of calm myself at some points of these uncertainties is what's worked. Sometimes I look at it like a game. Ki next kya hoga abhi dekhte hain. Right. The other thing is that for us, as a founder, it was a big conscious switch of going from loving the problem to loving the customer. right? Because sometimes the problem is not sees this to be relevant. Sometimes the solution sees this to be relevant. But if you are, passionate about the customer, you will continue to sort of just evolve around their needs because certain core needs always remain. Um, right? It'll just change in form or change in the learning pedagogy or change in the kind of course that's trending today or whatever it is. So that's sort of what if I had to summarize what work for us did. From a co-founder point of view, I did three things. One is I learned the things I didn't know. So I knew how to read code. I didn't know how to write code because it'd been years I'd written code. Second, we took a very, very strong bet on no code so that we have to write less code and we can ship fast and we get the early traction in, which then attracted, as I said, the right people in. Right. In today's day, I don't even think that's a problem. You go to Lovable or you go to Bolt and you just ship something out in probably an hour. Right. So very big advocate of things like no code or things like Replit. But I think there's no excuse to not building something today to attract either it's your first team or your first investor or whatever it is.
Right. Thank you. Very interesting couple of points that you made, but let me see if I have the time to connect it up in the end. Yash,
Yep.
quickly, your quick advice to
Absolutely.
founders.
I think what you said, like the first big fail which you get, right? I think that is a turning point. That is the place where you either build this mindset that this is going to continuously happen, and this is going to be a marathon where you're going to get a new problem, then you problem solve, ask yourself the hard question, spend more time with the customer, understand the core inside, go build again, then iterate on it, then get the metrics rolling, right? So if you are going to build that mindset that this is going to continuously happen, every new challenge I'm going to run into, I'll have to ask myself the hard questions. I'll have to be honest with myself and what the customer is saying about it, and go and build it through again, right? Like, and it might take multiple attempts to actually get there. I think that is number one, I would say. Number two is like learning to ask for help also, right? I feel I learned it slightly late in my journey, where I could think like, oh, let me just do this, like let me just do this and see, and I like made mistakes, learned from it, etc. But when you truly understand that if you can reach out to people for help and learn from them and learn from their mistakes, and it said like essentially our job now is to build on top of like the shoulders of all the giants we've built before us, and like they've got a ton of learnings and wisdom. And if it can actually help you like navigate a couple of big challenges which could get you in deep soup for 6-8 months and then you fix it, that can solve quite a bit for your journey, right? And I think that's what like either you read books or you talk to more folks, right? Both of those try and like give you that perspective and wisdom so that you're able to connect dots, and maybe the next challenge you're able to preempt, anticipate, and sort of not hit a roadblock there, right? So I think those would be a couple of points which can like help you in that journey. But having said all of this, I am still sure like it's your own journey and you'll run into a ton of those, and you'll have to have that mindset and that grind to figure out those problems and move forward.
Fair enough. I mean, absolutely. It's everybody's own journey, and therefore it's a journey that will have unexpected. It's like driving in Bangalore, man. There will be potholes that will be there when you didn't wear it there the previous day, and you just learn to drive and be successful. I'm going to request Professor Vikas, audience, to send questions. Professor Vikas sent me one, but before I get to that question, I just want to respond on the 2 points that I had made. But in the meanwhile, if people, you have questions, please send them. I'm going to shift over to the questions part of it shortly. And I talked about the first big fail. Think about the first big fail. It's the precursor to the second big fail. And that's how business is. You go through a series of learnings, and and many times lessons you learn from failures. You should learn lessons from success as well. So you make sure that you repeat. But many times we don't. We learn more lessons from failures. And I think accepting that they will happen and having the steel in your mind to be able to wrap around, and some of the answers to that starting with Loveleen saying becoming dispassionate. And I guess what he meant is not the passion for the business or the idea of being dispassionate in terms of being accepted. A little bit of a good old Indian philosophy kind of comes in there. You are able to absorb it and right? You definitely are entitled to the fruit also as an entrepreneur, but certainly recognize that you should be able to keep a little bit of a distance. The Western way of saying that is build a thick skin. I personally believe you should never build a thick skin. A normal thickness skin is very important because that will help you maintain the sensitivity that is needed in the marketplace in terms of responding to customers. But acceptance of the pain that comes in because of fear is very critical. And then as a youngster, many of you founders, I'm sure, are very young people, may not be fully apparent, but you go around the block a couple of times, it will become more and more apparent. And like what you said, build on top of the wisdom that others have generated. Well, this is one of the wisdom they will all tell you, that learn to accept it, and you will suddenly find you're a lot better entrepreneur and a manager as time goes by. The other point I was saying is learning to let go. I think Shronit, you talked about no code, right? I think this cycle of development of a product is now become, especially tech-based products, has become much, much shorter. And therefore, discovery of failure, discovery of something not working, let me not use the word failure because sometimes people get worried about it, but discovering something is not going to work is now much faster, incredibly fast. Now this is the trick. You are convinced there is a problem and there is a solution, and the pathway to the solution is what you have thought through. And then you are very quickly able to discover when you're starting to implement through, writing a piece of software, building a product, before your viable product comes, you realize that it's not going to work. Is this a problem of the solution, or it's a problem of the implementation of the solution? This is where you need to be able to get into a recursive thinking and have the confidence to be able to think through. In fact, this is not anything new for entrepreneurs alone. Product managers have to learn this very, very quickly now, because the cyclicity, the velocity of discovery of whether something is working or not is so very quick now. I think that's to be recognized as well. So the one question that's come so far is that how should startups balance between growth and sustainability in their early stages? So growth, I would interpret, I hope I'm doing the right interpretation, is scale, size, sales, and revenues and all of that stuff. Sustainability is making sure you are able to keep the lights on, i.e. profitability. Don't run it entirely out of your money raised in the balance sheet. Make sure your business is profitable. I suppose those are the two interpretation. At least let's take that as the interpretation for our purpose. Request any of you can start responding, very quick response, and then the others can join in. Go ahead.
So if I take that up, I think it depends upon the type of company you're building, right? Not every company will have revenue from day one, right? And but then there are businesses which are revenue first, and if you are a revenue first business, you should definitely focus on the gross margins, right? Then only you will be eventually EBITDA positive, right? So if you're running with very low gross margins, then you should rethink whether this is really worth. Right. So I think that's where you need to figure out, right? You should, and then you need to also figure out a low customer acquisition channel, right?
Strategy.
Right. Unless and until you have that, then eventually you will run out of your money, right? So in the time and the money which you have, I think these are the two things: figuring out a high gross margin and then figuring out a low CAC or a customer acquisition channel are the two things, in my view, which you should definitely keep an eye on, right? And if you can build profitably, then nothing like that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think if I had to add to that, I think sustainability is a necessity. It's just that are you a venture-backed business who first needs to optimize for large scale versus are you a bootstrapped or a lifestyle business? It depends on how much you can push that sustainability window away. right? But because if you are, then if you're a venture-backed business, you need to optimize for large scale at some point, right? Because that's when VCs will see returns and you will attract VC capital. So it's first a question of what business are you building, but sooner or later you will have to solve for margins, regardless of what business you're building. So if you can solve for it from the very start, then that's nothing like it.
Right. And you're right. And what Loveleen said, you then address margins in three parts. Margins as gross margins, to make the basic business viable. Then margins as cash margins, EBITDA, and taking it a slightly one step further, cash profits that you generate. And finally, when you're a more mature enterprise, margins from the, bottom line, PBT kind of an angle that you need to look at. Totally agree with you, Yash.
Yep, I think absolutely concur with what Loveleen said, right? Like eventually the business has to be self-sustainable, right? So if the unit economics are not making sense at any scale, they are not going to make sense really, right? So, and at any point of time, you should have even if you are burning money or investing for growth, you need to have clarity on a path to profitability, I believe, right? I think those are like given statements now in the fundraising industry and market, especially in the edtech sector. I would say that the focus has come back more on sustainability rather than just growth and just driving growth first. And I think that's a fair ask. And the last 1 year, I think all the edtech businesses and the sector as a whole has been able to sort of reflect and get back and make sure that the foundation and fundamentals are clean enough. Yeah, you are building a business essentially which is in most times negative working capital, right? You're getting money from the customer first and then delivering those services.
Right.
Can you power your growth through your cash flows, right? If the margins and like Loveleen said again, if your CACs are solved for, which was the real problem for the last 4 or 5 years, I believe that the sector was burning aggressively to acquire customers with no real like LTV there, right? And essentially those economics were never going to make sense. So I think that pressure to think about sustainability has come in. I think that's helped a lot of businesses and entrepreneurs actually build their business in a manner which will run longer, which will be able to sort of create a larger impact, even if it might take a few years more or so. But I think those will be more solid businesses to look at. Yeah.
Mm. A very interesting question. The point that you made, Yash, and I'm going to ask you very quickly to respond on that is, what role does competition play? If you're in a solution, opportunity solution, link your businesses in a area where there is less competition, versus where there is maybe a red ocean in terms of the large size from a market, but there are multiple players.
Yeah.
What should a entrepreneur do? What should a startup founder do? Is it an easy question to be answered? Don't go to red ocean at all and stick only to blue ocean, because strategy has got these nice little boxes. Real life is not.
True. So I think both approaches there, right? Like in the industry which we were there, right? It was a red ocean for 22, 23, I think those years, right? And there are too many players with a lot of money, a lot of push to acquire customers also. But then eventually you need to get back to the drawing board that if it's a red ocean market with someone with much, much, much higher amount of capital than what you have, either you move your business to the blue ocean, right? Or you find a way of having much lower CACs, a new GTM approach, and innovation which can actually help you break through that red ocean market, right? And I think those are the two things which can be done, right? I think there's no real third strategy out of it, where if you don't have money and someone else has much more money and everyone's burning, they have the power to burn more money.
That's right. One of the interesting things I have seen talking to all the three of you in my experience, looking at literally tens and if not hundreds of founders and their companies, early stage companies, is that there are many instances of incredible success come from founders in red ocean markets, but who discovered a distinct differentiator, because you don't have to create the market. The market is already there. You don't have to make somebody get used to whatever you're trying to, to make them understand, yeah, there is a problem. Many times they don't understand. And you see a problem as an entrepreneur far earlier than the market actually does. And in which case, if you have a differentiation, which is a stellar, a stunning differentiation, then you are likely to be more successful in the red ocean area as against being in the blue ocean. Let me just go to the second question that's come up. We have 9 minutes more, which is, what are some of the common scaling mistakes that one should avoid? Shronit, you want to start?
Yeah, I think one of them we just discussed, right? So when common scaling mistake is you burn too much money, you don't look at sustainability. The other one we ended up doing to an extent was we ended up overhiring. Right. So after we raised our first significant round, we ended up hiring more people than we needed, which also you don't realize very soon because you feel like, oh, itna sara karna hai, such big goals, so many things. Uh, we one should have done lesser things. Right. I think, and I think this is a key difference I've seen between Indian startups versus American startups. They stick to like one thing for forever, and Indian they probably try like 7 things and then see what sticks. Um, uh, we definitely tried like 7 things at that point, and thus we hired people to do all those 7 things, which sort of dissipates energy beyond just, of course, burns money and is a waste of resource. Pulls the org in different directions. Brand doesn't form in a particular area. And of course, you don't have unlimited resources. You just had more resources than what you were used to as compared to before. So that's something we ended up doing from personal experience.
One of my mentors many years back, and these were the days when there used to be these things called checks that you needed to give for paying money. You to tell me, remember 2 things as an entrepreneur. I was very young, just 27 years old, and he said 2 things. One is hasten slowly. He says you have to understand what that really means. You will understand as an entrepreneur what is hasten slowly. And the second thing is that when you want to issue a check, forget your pen. So you can't issue a check, so that's expense control, in his own inimitable way. I found that to be incredibly valid advice, not to be taken literally, of course, but in context, incredibly valid advice. But Lovely, what are the common mistakes that you have seen? You've now seen what, 30 plus investments, your own journey, others that you would have seen, lots and lots of them, dozens of them. What do you think? What are the common mistakes? Just take a couple quick ones.
Yeah, I think I'll come back to the same thing, right? When you're scaling, you should be clear about what are you chasing, right? If your CAC and gross margins don't work at small scale, they will never work at a large scale. At the gross margins still may, but CAC won't, right? So you have to be very clear about that, right? Then I think one more thing which I've seen very commonly is that founders don't want to look at finance at all, right? Right. I mean, if
Very good.
right, no one is actually looking at their MIS, and sometimes I see that investors are also not interested, right? So I've seen a lot of companies which have come to me at a stage where they're kind of going to shut down in a few months, and I tell them, go back, show me your MIS, and can we cut down your expenses by 3x, right? And I'm telling you from my experience, every time you sit on your MIS, there'll be an opportunity to cut down your cost by 10% minimum, right? People think of this as a very boring thing to do, but I think there lies the key. You would have accumulated too many people in the organization. You would have accumulated too many tools, right? Especially the tech founders believe ये भी tool लगा लेते हैं, वो भी लगा लेते हैं, it will increase, and then you figure out no one is using them and the ROI is not there, right? So I think you have to, and your mentor, and you rightly said, right, keep a forget your pen when you're writing a check. These days, I think it's very simple, right? You just click a button and you subscribe to something, right? And it just you never know how big it has become on your monthly bill, right? And there are times when I've seen people say that we are a tech company and our costs will be very low, but then their gross margins are affected by so many SaaS tools they're using, right? So I think keep an eye on your finances. If not on a bi-weekly basis, definitely on a monthly basis. Go through each and every item. Don't think that this is a 5,000 rupee expense. This is not important. Look at that, and then when you are scaling, make sure that you're scaling the right way. Your lot of people, when they do projections, they say that when we grow big, our acquisition costs, our marketing costs will come down low. That is never going to happen, right? It is going to increase only, right? And one more thing which I wanted to add from the previous discussion was that, to see, whatever is a blue ocean today, if it is worth it, it will become a red ocean because everyone will come in there, right? So you have to be very, very clear. Don't think that today is the opportunity, let me grab everything, right, at the cost of burning down all your resources, right? So you have to be very conscious there. That's how I'll put it.
Yeah, absolutely. And as Edtech for sure, and to some extent, fintech has shown repeatedly, the propensity to raise huge amount of money in the balance sheet, and then allow it to get blown up because you have no control in your mind and thinking. And that doesn't mean that in some businesses spending more and waiting for a while to get profitability is incorrect. Amazon has shown that they were loss making for a long time, but they stuck to the model, learned, kept improving, and they actually started making money through AWS first, not through their core business. And finally, you see where they are today. So there is a lot of lessons to be on. Yash, what do you think? Very quickly, or what are the common scaling mistakes?
Sure. So first is like hire slowly and carefully, right? Like make sure the people coming in are a
But how
culture.
do you hire carefully? Because you don't know whether the person is going to fit in or not.
Absolutely. Like I think the first is have a decent enough hiring process where you've evaluated every parameter. You've actually got a fit check. If it is someone senior, you've genuinely spent time off work discussions also with them, figured out if they are a cultural fit. Second, once they're in, the first couple of months are a place where the person is actually getting molded into the company's culture and the work and the style, right? That is the place where you should take that time and effort to spend that time with them, right? I think that is one. Because over hiring, and then not really putting the time to train them, mold them is the thing which compounds as a problem with time, I believe. The second, again, which Loveleen said, very, very fair, that look at your metrics, your MIS, backtrack where you want to be, what you want to solve for, measure it every month, keep looking at, like, spend time on it, think about it, right? People, even MISs which are created in companies which are at a decent scale, they're just getting created for the sake of it, right? Like,
So
I'm sure,
focus
like,
on that.
yeah, I believe like in our company also, like 7 MISs would be created for like different functions, and eventually how much time are we really spending on that and reflecting that what metric moved, why it moved, are we able to reason and figure out what we've done correct to get it right, and can we continue to improve it? That is second, I would say. And third, again, right, that like when you're scaling, you're in the rush of the growth, right? Like I'm growing 15% a month, right? Are you actually taking the time to double check that is the customer love and the customer
So focus
feedback
on
and
the
response is
continuously focus
equally
on the customer.
strong, right? Because that is essentially the biggest contributor to your brand being created, right?
At the end of the day.
So and at scale, it is easy to dismiss it off from your mind, right?
Right. But I'm glad you talked about process, because many times entrepreneurs, early stage especially, tend to give process the complete go by. And I'm not saying we should become so process oriented that you unwittingly become bureaucratic. But the fact that you talked about go through the process of hiring right, spend the time, create a process for settling a person. And small example, it's a good importance of process. So we've run out of time. Let me just do a very quick summary. I hope the listeners have had a quick absorption. Very quickly, Loveleen said business model. He talked about PMF and the MVP. That entire process, recognize, figure that out. May take time, but figure it out and get it right. Get the right team. Shravan talks about finding the right co-founder. It's a challenge that he went through, and then it kind of contextually got sorted out. But it's very clear. The first fundraising, we didn't speak about it much, but that's you can have a lot of war stories on first fundraise. All of us will have a lot of war stories. I have several of them, but we'll keep it for another day. Yash talked about finding a CTO, and you talked about MVP. And then, of course, the first big fail. And there's a whole bunch of takeaways that came in terms of how to handle, how to tackle these things. I'm not going to list them all down. I hope people have taken some notes. It's valuable. It's being recorded, I know. Professor Vikas, I hope it gets posted and people have a chance to run through this again. I think there is a lot of takeaways from these three outstanding entrepreneurs. So thank you all very much. Neha, if you're there, take it away. All the very best to everybody.
Thank you,
Awesome.
sir. Thank
Thank
you
you.
all for sharing your valuable thoughts and making this an engaging discussion. Let us now move on to another intriguing panel discussion on the topic building and scaling a sustainable startup. We are honored to have with us an esteemed panel of industry leaders, Hari Krishnan Nair, co-founder of Great Learning, a learning global edtech company focused on upskilling professionals. Under his leadership, Great Learning has empowered thousands of learners with industry-relevant programs in collaboration with top universities. Mayank Kumar, co-founder of Upgrad and Water Plus. As a driving force behind Upgrad, he has played a pivotal role in shaping the online higher education landscape, making quality learning accessible to professionals worldwide. His latest venture, Water Plus, focuses on simplifying global mobility for individuals and businesses. We have Mr. Chaitanya Kalipatnapu, co-founder of Emeritus, a global leader in professional education. He has been instrumental in scaling Emeritus partnership with top universities, helping professionals worldwide acquire cutting-edge skills for career advancement. Moderating this session is Mr. Ravi Garikipati, co-founder of Daventa FinServe and former CTO of Flipkart. He is also board member at NIT Axis Mutual Fund and 5paisa, and an active investor in multiple edtech startups. With his vast experience in technology, fintech, and entrepreneurship, he brings valuable insights to this discussion. This promises to be a thought-provoking session, and we encourage the audience to participate by typing their questions in the chat box. Our panelists will address them at the end of the discussion. With that, I would hand it over to Mr. Ravi Garipati for further deliberations.
Thank you, Neha. Much appreciated ice-breaking introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. It's truly a pleasure to welcome you all to today's exciting panel discussion. Building and scaling a sustainable startup. We often talk about building and scaling a startup. Operative keyword here is sustainable startup. Honored to be here moderating this conversation with all of you. Incredible group of entrepreneurs, been through this journey for a good length of time. We all know that launching a startup itself is a challenge. Now, scaling it while being sustainable, it's a different ball game altogether. And today's businesses are more and more expected to be not only profitable but also responsible, ethical, bring a semblance of integrity and honesty in how they do it. And they're glowing examples of companies who've been able to do that. And they're also companies who sort of fast track their growth and scale in slightly different ways and fraught with challenges much later. So, many startups begin with this great idea for building a startup with the vision and values, which need to be sustained. But over the course of time, for multitude of reasons, we tend to sort of, miss out on few core values, and while securing for funding or finding the right market fit, having the right team, adapting to rapidly evolving marketing changes or business changes, your oftentimes the focus is elsewhere, and don't spend the kind of time that you're required to spend on what it takes to build a sustainable startup. I think you will see me emphasizing a little bit on the sustainability quite a bit during this panel discussion, while even the previous one spoke a little bit about what it takes to scale a company, scale a startup, the previous panel discussion. That said, there are companies that, they've done incredibly well in the past as well. I come from Valley and I've seen from close quarters, consumer tech companies back in 2000, built, scalable, businesses while maintaining the sustainability. You're talking about Google, Meta, enterprises such as Microsoft have seen many seasons over many decades and able to sustain while scaling their businesses across many facets. And in Indian context, I've been part of a Flipkart journey myself. A few other consumer tech companies, the last is the distance, and there's some lessons to be gleaned as well. I don't have to name all of them. Particularly, our focus is going to be scaling while maintaining sustainability in the edtech world. That's where I think, three of you are on this panel stand out. You've done incredible job in sort of going through that journey, while many attempting to mimic and better. But you guys continue to be beachheads. So with that, I want to sort of focus on a few key themes, and feel free to sort of bring in anything that you think is relevant for this discussion, that you think will be a great help for the audience, particularly the young entrepreneurs looking to build scalable businesses with this sustainability as their focus. The theme that I am largely going to focus is the funding and hiring the right talent and technology impact on scaling the businesses, and then of course GTM, particularly customer acquisition, lifetime value nuances. So I don't necessarily have any set order. I'll probably do a bit of an icebreaker. May seem a bit abstract, but it's important for us to sort of get our head around and talk about this or hear about it through you guys, particularly the sustainability. What are the foundational elements that one should really focus on when you talk of sustainability? Scaling is generally something that every startup looks at, and there is some playbooks out there, but very few playbooks that I see that are proven that will help you build scalable businesses with sustainability intact. So maybe all three of you have gone through the journey and build businesses. So I'm not going to pick anyone. It's if you unless you put your hand up, I'll just go alphabetically. Chaitanya, I'll start with you, and just take us through what you reckon are some of the key virtues or aspects that we need to bear in mind when you look at building a sustainable startup. What comes naturally to your mind? You've done that for a good length of time, and you've been through a few iterations as well. So maybe give your take on what are the foundational elements.
Yeah, thanks, Ravi, and pleasure to be in this panel along with Mayank and Hari, and thanks NIIT for the invitation. Ravi, just maybe diving right in, I just want to define like a sustainable startup as something that's that is showing profitable growth, right? To start with, right? That is profitable and at the same time growing, and which is which in my view is thinking long term and at the same time being consistent, be it with financial results or the impact, especially in the case of Edtech. Maybe I'll just touch upon one or two points. I'm sure Hari and Mayank would add in. Maybe the one part is on the mission part that I just want to stress upon in terms of foundational block. The second one, of course, is the having the apt or the right business model to start with. When I just look at Emeritus, so we started in 2010, and again, this came up from a deep pain point both me and my co-founder experienced in terms of access to high quality education, in terms of how could we cascade it to more people, or rather flip the model. Instead of students packing their bags going to a great university, can we flip the model to take the university to where the student is? So it stemmed from our deep desire, which became our mission statement in terms of providing this high quality education and making it accessible and affordable. The reason I say that is a foundational element is that when we started, we are like 4 of our team members. The kind of language or the values, the behaviors we exhibited, we wanted that to be the same way to right now 2,385 team members across 17 countries after 14 years. So in that sense, that mission or having that common set of values becomes a building block as we try to scale profitably. And also it becomes a North Star in terms of, can we address a large enough TAM at the same time, create an impact. And more importantly, in terms of defining our strategy to say what we do and what we don't do. So all in all, that having that common language of the mission, thereby espousing the values that we want to exhibit, becomes a very important foundational block as we look at a journey over a long term. I'll just pause. Maybe I'm sure Hari and Mayank would add in with other elements.
No, well said, Chaitanya. So, before I take stab at paraphrasing or summarizing, would like to hear your thoughts, Hari and Mayank, as you navigated through this journey.
So, first of all, thank you. Thanks, Ravi. Thanks, NIT, for this opportunity. It's a pleasure to be here with Chaitanya and Mayank and everybody else who's listening. The interesting thing about this panel, if I may just digress, is that you have 3 different entrepreneurs who built 3 different companies solving the same mission, which is, access to high quality education. And I think through the course of this conversation, I'm hoping what the audience we get to hear are 3 very different perspectives, because there's no one right way of doing something, right? The fact is that all 3 companies are successful and they've stood the test of time, right? So I think that's just a fantastic perspective to get. To the question you asked, Ravi, in terms of sustainable startup, right? To my mind, in addition to what Chaitanya said is extremely important, which is defining the mission and aligning everybody to it from day one. 2 things that I would think have been extremely important in our journey, especially. First is keeping, a very close eye on the guardrails and maintaining that discipline right from day one, right? So whether that is on the financial side, whether that is on the culture side, whatever it be, I think it's extremely important that the founding team defines the guardrails in which you want the business to operate, and makes it a point that those guardrails don't get breached, for any reason whatsoever. I say that because especially in times of frenzied scale up, we often hear that discipline can follow, but discipline never follows, right? Discipline has to be instilled first, right? It's very late to, become a large company and then kind of, figure out guardrails. So I think that is one point. The other point, especially in the early years of a venture, I believe it's extremely important that you define what is the problem you're trying to solve and stick to it, because there will be many opportunities / distractions that will come your way. You may want to do, X, Y, Z, but I think it's extremely important that you prioritize and you say, okay, X is the problem that we want to solve, and then go deep into it, solve that problem, get to a scale before you start tackling any other problems. Often, what I see young entrepreneurs do is try to solve too many problems at the same time just because they believe that every problem, presents a vast opportunity. And I think that is that more often than not is a recipe for failure.
Yeah, well said. Absolutely. Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Mayank, you want to add anything?
Yeah. So I have a just very simple thing in education, Ravi. And first of all, thank you for having me today. And I think it's always good to, it's always tough to follow it after Chaitanya and Hari have spoken, because then you're not left with anything to speak and talk about. But I think just one point I wanted to just touch upon here, because you used the word sustainable, and I think profitable, sustainable, scalable is sort of an important aspect of the question that you asked. I feel that specifically in the education context, I agree with what Chaitanya and Hari said, but just to define it and narrow it down slightly more, I think the word outcomes matter a lot on different kind of outcomes. Some people seek outcomes in terms of better job, better salary. Some people seek outcome in better credential, better validation, so on and so forth. So as long as an education entity or education company can focus on providing outcomes, I think sustainability happens via that. And what I mean by this, Ravi, is that if, let's say, outcomes are good, then you start getting the marketing cost starts getting lower and lower, because in education, one of the Achilles heel has been the customer acquisition cost. And if you have great outcomes, your teaching cost may go up, but your maybe acquisition cost will come down over a period of time. So for one of the things that I've realized that businesses and companies traditionally over a long period of time and focus on outcomes. And I think both Emeritus and Great Learning have done so for a fairly long period of time. And that's where the sustainability comes in, because it's always a yin yang, how much you push more for study, education and delivery, and how much you push for acquisition and customer marketing. And if you focus on outcomes, I think both of them find their own balance over a period of time. And this fine balance is one of the toughest nut to crack when it comes to the education space and education sector.
No, very well said. And you know, some great points being called out by all three of you. And I think it's important to call out that vision and mission. And that is something that should not change over your course of your entrepreneurial journey. That's a constant. While businesses tend to pivot and they're adaptive to changing business and marketing conditions, your mission and vision very rarely change. And aligning the entire team to that common vision and mission, very important. In the entrepreneurs, the founders play a significant role. The common set of values that you define, the guardrails that you prescribe to ensure that we don't go off rail. And of course, Mayank, to your point, and if you focus on outcomes, and your point is that you will invariably strike a right balance between growth and profitability. I think the point well made. Switching gears a little bit, and this is where I think I've seen from my own vantage point, I've been part of a few startups myself, some very successful, some not so for multitude of reasons. The managing sustainability while growing. I know you briefly spoke about Mayank, and I think it's a pretty nuanced topic. There are many ways. There are folks who actually bootstrap their business, and once they arrive at product market fit and they identify their beachhead segment, and then they look for scale, and that's when they look for more resources. There's some who actually embark on a pretty good idea that has a broad acknowledgement, recognition that is a broad enough market amongst investment community, and they probably be able to raise capital as well. And post doing that, they run into other set of challenges. Growth versus maintaining the unit economics and profitability, a balance in the burn rate with the revenue growth. And some have managed to do that well, but it's not as easy as we make it out to be. And I would like to reach out to each one of you and have us, basically take us through some of your experiences, what worked, what didn't, and some of the lessons that you guys learned. That'll be great help for the audience. Again, maybe Mayank, you just sort of boarded that discussion, focusing on outcomes. Maybe I would like to hear.
So I think it's what you asked in the question is very important, Ravi, because in education, many a times when you raise external capital, what ends up happening is that you are asked to chase certain things which may not necessarily, as Chaitanya said, is not long-term aligned with your vision. And I think I find it's very easy for the entrepreneurs to say that, look, yeah, investor ne bola tha, therefore this is what has happened. But that's a big cop-out. I also personally feel that at the end of the day, you have raised money, you got the set of investors on your own count. And that's where I feel that as entrepreneurs, we need to be extremely strong and rigid about how we want to build a business. And you need to find the right set of investors coming along with you, people who have slightly long-term visibility, long-term sort of vision alignment, without which you do end up getting into a trap of trying to build a business for the investor rather than building the business for your consumer, customers, or your stakeholders. And that's been one sort of challenge area that I've at least seen in the space. So for me, I think my advice to anybody venturing out in the education space is that you will get a lot more, how do I say, you will get enamored by the PE VC ecosystem to build a business for themselves. But look, you are building the business for yourself, you're building the business for your own customer. And as an entrepreneur, you get one chance to get it right. I guess a VC or a private equity entity will get 10 chances, and if one of them gets right, it's good enough for them. So when you are looking for one chance to build right, build it in the right way, build it with the right fundamentals, build it with the right long-term vision alignment, and get the right sort of people who aligns with you rather than later forcing you to build for somebody else rather than building it for yourself.
Yeah, thank you. Hari, you want to add to what Mayank just said? Yeah.
Yeah. So Ravi, our journey at Great Learning has been a little different because we have been bootstrapped, right? We never took any external capital by choice. We said that we want to bootstrap and get it to scale. And over the past 12 years that we've been building Great Learning, it's been, it's all been the business, it's all been the money that the business has generated, which we've put back into the business and invested and so on to get to a scale of, 1000 CR plus that we are currently operating at. Um, so I think in our journey, then of course, like every other startup, there are always choices and discussions on whether we should raise capital, what benefit or advantage would that capital provide, and so on. And for us, we were very clear that we should raise money when we really need that money rather than raising money just because competition has raised money or everybody in edtech is raising money, right? So we consciously stayed away from that. And I think that is an advice that I would give everybody that, there's no one way to build a scalable venture, right? You can raise capital and still build a very large, sustainable, scalable, successful venture. You can even bootstrap your way to success, right? I think it really depends upon which is the path you want to take. And if you are raising capital, then you have to partner with the right set of investors like Mayank and Chaitanya mentioned, right? They have to be long-term aligned. And as an entrepreneur, you should be very certain as to why are you raising that money, right? What is the need that it is going to service for you?
Yeah. Hari, before I go to Chetan, I just wanted to hear your. I think you made a very telling point, and it's important for the audience, the entrepreneurs, to pay more attention to what you just said. It's conventional wisdom says, don't have to go raise money when you really don't need it, and there should be a real reason why you need to raise. For me, having been at various startup gigs myself, the very basic prerequisite is you need to have a product market fit, and you need to have a good idea about your unit economics. And until then, there's no point raising money, however big the opportunity is and the space that you're in. Most entrepreneurs are passionate. They have a good handle on the problem statement. They'll be able to convince the VCs. VCs also go through FOMO, and they may be are willing to write a check. But once you take money from VCs, not only you get driven, inadvertently, by their agenda in some cases, I wouldn't say in all cases, but you also, on your own, compelled to do few things that right off the bat are not the right things to do, right? Growth at any cost, and because you have resources and so on and so forth. How maybe the what I'm expecting from three of you build scalable businesses, the downside of doing that, and in some cases it's a point of no return, and you won't be able to recover as well. You're going down that downward spiral. While the opportunity is big enough, large enough, you're doing the right things, opportunity is not going to vanish in thin air. I mean, there are many red ocean opportunities, people still making great businesses, right? But yet, what I just said sounds logical. What you said, Hari, sounds logical, but yet many don't seem to embark on that path. Why is that, and what is that the new gen entrepreneurs should be taking away from your experiences, our experiences? Maybe a little bit more emphasis, because there's too much capital being raised, and too soon, and that's leading down the path.
Ravi, is that what I often see with young entrepreneurs or young ventures is that they believe that money will solve problems, right? That external capital will solve fundamental problems for them, fundamental problems like product market fit, right? Which has never happened, right? So I think the onus of solving for that product market fit is for the entrepreneur and that initial team that is building the product. Nobody else can come and solve it for you, right? So believing that raising a ton of capital will suddenly, make that path easier is, I think, is just a false hope, right? It never works like that, right? Once you have solved for product market fit, to scale up, of course, raising capital is one way to scale your business, or if your business is profitable and you have cash from the business, redeploying that is also another way, right? And both paths are fine. But raising too much money too soon is definitely a handicap, right? Just from my personal experience. So around 2018, 19, which is about 6, 7 years since we started Great Learning, when we had achieved a certain amount of scale and we were starting to get known, there was a lot of inbound interest that we received from the investor community. And for in all those conversations, the point that was told to us was that, okay, what you guys have built is good, right? But let's make it even better. Why don't you enter K-12, right? That is a big opportunity, right? And all of us remember 2018, 19, 20, and the surge that was happening in K-12, right? So then the wisdom in the investment community was that enter K-12, right? That is the way to go, right? That is where the big opportunities. And now we are in 2023, 24, 25, where we've seen that K-12 opportunity is completely vanished, and suddenly upskilling and higher education and professional education is where the big opportunity is in EdTech, right? So I think it is more important that entrepreneurs have that conviction that, okay, this is the opportunity, this is a problem that I want to solve, rather than being swayed by what people will pay money for, because that's not going to solve your problem.
Yeah, makes total sense. And Chetan, unless you want to add something more, there's another important topic I want you to sort of take a view. One, it's more to do with the go-to-market and customer acquisition strategy, right? Assuming that see, when you build something at the beginning, right, there is this belief that what you're building, the problems that you're addressing may apply to many segments of customers, right? And often, and you will realize much later, if you're really attentive to the customer feedback, the resonance of your solve is greater in some segment and not so much, right? And it reflects in retention and many other metrics, right? That you can look at. They're proxies to glean that insight. So, what is that you've done in your journey as you're building? There it is, figuring out your ICP, the ideal customer profile, and is any signs there that you've sort of figured out that you can share with the audience here? And then relating to that, once you have the ICP, how do you find ways to acquire that customer? How do you optimize CAC over time? And also, potentially, get better LTV from the customer. So it's largely around the go-to-market, ICP, and acquisition nuances is what I want to understand from you.
Yeah. Sure. I think this ties back to the funding part as well. As you're talking about, once you have the product market fit, I think the best form of funding is what you can get from a customer rather than from an investor, right? I fundamentally believe in that. And in that sense, your fundraise should not be the goal, but to what Mayank said, the impact or what you're living up to your mission has to be the goal. So when it comes to the product market fit, look, as much as we talk about the product market fit, I would also think, especially in education sector, is also important to have the founder venture fit in terms of why is it that you can make a difference in terms of the sector. And for us at Emeritus, it came in a little naturally because I was working at INSEAD Business School in their executive education for 4 years, have seen, had a ringside view in terms of the kind of impact that professional education could make. So in some sense, it grew organically, or we had an understanding that, okay, this is the potential target market that's out there, or this could be the bells and whistles or the features of a product or a program that we could launch in the market. So that's how we started. So the hypothesis when we had, again, is more about putting something in the market, bootstrapping, and see whether it could have the traction with respect to the CAC, with respect to the willingness to pay, etc. And if it doesn't work, fail fast. So I think that's the approach that we went with. And because of some of this background of the experience, we had a hypothesis that in professional education, working with a top tier brand, we can put together a program which in the process can deliver an outcome or an impact to what Mayank spoke about. And so that's how we went in. And once we had traction where we had a sense that, okay, CAC is under what we have had an hypothesis, then I think we took the aspect about scaling similar product. So broadly, when we launched or when we entered either the start of the company or a new product line, etc., this has been an approach that we have followed. And as I say this, it's not that not all the time we are successful, but the important part is that to be laser focused on what you're solving, not just to spray and pray. And the second thing is also when to pull the plug when things are not working. So I think these are important elements along the journey. Maybe I'll pause there. I could dive deeper if needed.
No, great point. And I just want to, extend your thought process on one point. Pull the plug when it is required, and that's something that oftentimes entrepreneurs find it hard to do it. And the common fallacy that we all gone into or seen it happening at some point or the other is, it's okay to acquire a customer as long as you're solving the problem, no matter what the cost of acquisition is. And with this perceived notion that we can increase the lifetime value in future, and it'll all play out okay. CAC to LTV, that's a metric that we often call out, and we draw a lot of comfort on the Excel spreadsheet. Putting some number out there and say, hey, sometime in future we'll hit that and everything is hunky dory. So, but you also mentioned, one, not to be ruthless and very bring that intellectual honesty, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and pull the plug, right? So, is any again any when do you make the call? When do you know? This we have this misplaced understanding of product market fit. When you are struggling to acquire a customer, you have to burn a lot of resource to acquire a customer, and you're lulling yourself into believing that in a future the way to monetize the customer in a better ways. That how do you actually, since you said you should be willing to pull the plug if it doesn't, when do you make that call? And which means you need to get your unit economics going right from the day one, right off the bat, or this is the time that I give myself to optimize and get to that unit economics positive scenario, and at which point I have this comfort to scale. What's your take?
Look, for us, the important part here is that have some guardrails on the cost of acquisition, and not to have this utopia that, okay, the customer, a learner comes now and he or she will provide the LTV that even if your cost of acquisition is more than your ARPU, etc., it will work out. So I think that could be quite utopian in our view. But in the context of the sectors that we operate in or the programs that we have a runway of at least maybe 2 or 3 runs of the cohort for that CAC to stabilize, etc., to make this sustainable in your words, right? And if that is not happening, because we have 14 years of data backing to say that given a particular program in a particular theme with a particular school, what's the runway that it would have for it to make it profitable or make it sustainable. So I think right now we have the comfort of the data, Ravi, but maybe 5 years ago, at the same time, the idea is to be very, very disciplined. I think Hari spoke about that, to say that not to have this. It's quite easy to be wedded to the idea to have this version of a Stockholm syndrome to say that okay, it will eventually work. But I think to have the discipline to say that okay, if the guardrail of the CAC, let's say more than 80% of the if it goes more than 80% in the first 2 runs, depending on the product. I'm just giving an example. So we will not do this, or we will not be in this segment. Could be is one approach that we do, and to be very brutal about it. Otherwise, yeah, it will just be a leaky bucket, and by the time you realize it, it's in the red.
Totally makes sense. Well said, Chaitanya. So now another elephant in the room, and with that is large. I'm now talking about building a strong and resilient team. The importance of the team when you're looking to build scalable businesses and maintaining sustainability. I know founders, play a big role, and defining the vision, mission, and values and guardrails. Um, um, you know, and the when you comes to building the team that you require when you're going through 0 to 1, uh, not necessarily the same. Some, although I'll be very careful not to make a blanket statement here. In some scenarios, you do find the need to sort of refresh your team or upskill your team or bring new talent as you're embarking on scale journey, right? And some entrepreneurs recognize that, and they are willing to make those calls dispassionately. Some struggle to make that switch, right? And so they're saying what got you here may not get you to where you want to get to, and something ought to change. And oftentimes it involves changing the team as bringing the new talent. I wouldn't call it changing, bringing the new talent that is required to scale your businesses. I would like to sort of pick your brains and glean your experiences here. Hari, you want to start?
Sure. I think that's a very valid point, Ravi, and it is in fact, as you scale up for an entrepreneur, that is one of the key problems to solve, right? That how do you equip every problem with the right team, right? And sometimes you will come to the realization that the current team that you have is not fully equipped to solve that problem, right? So the approach that we take, or we have taken always, is that we always try and give growth to folks who've been with us for a long time and who've actually performed over the years, right? So it's a very like a positive reinforcement and constant reward mechanism, right? New opportunities, new challenges, always first provided to folks that we have identified within the system who we believe are ready to take on let's say, the next challenge. Most times for us it has worked, but there have also been times where it has not worked, right? And in those cases, we've just been very honest with the person that, listen, what the skills that are needed, right? The magnitude of challenge that needs to be solved. Probably we need external talent to come in and solve that, right? And in those cases, we've gone outside and hired from the market, and tried to make it work, right? So I think it is a balance you have to strike. In my experience, I feel dissatisfaction and disenchantment in the existing workforce happens when they realize on two aspects. One, if the founding team is not being honest and transparent with them. So I think that is a non-negotiable, right? As founders, as leaders, you have to be always honest and transparent with your team, right? That is one part to it, right? So if there is a veiled communication, that does not go down well, right? The other part is that I think disenchantment happens if they realize that they were never given the opportunity to prove themselves, right? So hence, what at least I believe is that if you identify people in your team who are good, capable, top performers, who are ready to get to the next rung of challenges, then give them that opportunity and be very honest and frank with them, right? If they can solve it, great. If they can't solve it, then the business needs to solve it, which means we will need external talent to come in and step in and solve the problem.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Mayank, my question in the same realm is more about how you actually continue to inspire and motivate and as a result retain the top talent that you need to be able to build a scalable businesses. And oftentimes you realize these businesses are not built overnight, and you need to have folks who are committed as much as you are to the problem statement and stay the course for good length of time. And what in your experience has worked in terms of being able to retain the top talent? And
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, fair. So Ravi, on that note, one of the points that Hari mentioned, that it does take, as you go through different journeys, it does change. I think one point I want to touch upon is somebody told me very early, and he was perhaps giving me the a more sort of empirical evidence that from your Series A or whatever seed, Series A round, or Series B till the time you land up with your IPO, your leadership changes on average about 2.5 to 3.5 times. So there's a sort of full shown of the leadership given the different stages that you are coming in. And as much as I think somebody mentioned that you can be extremely passionate about the business but not emotional. So at certain point of time, you just have to ensure that you are bringing on that change and don't get too stuck up and being emotional about the problem rather than being just passionate about the problem. So I think that's just one thought and advice that I would like to sort of share with everybody, that there is bound to be a change, because I think early days when you get people in, they are more, let's say, expert in their domains and product experts. They understand how to build the initial sort of product. And then to scaling up, the skill sets change significantly. And you need people with understanding of P&L, how to look at numbers in a very sort of unique way, so on and so forth. So I think that bit happens over a period of time. For us, I think at the leadership level, for the three things that works out really well, and I think the same thing works lower down the order also. One very critical part of how to retain people is just being over communicative, and I think that's helped us at least to let people know all the news upfront. How is it working in your department with some other departments, and then therefore what's the impact of this at the overall company level? Just being more communicative and being more transparent and being more honest definitely helps in connecting a lot with folks out there. Not just leadership level, but lower down, because I do get the question from sales team coming up and saying, "Sir, I did this, but how is it helping the larger company?" And the more you communicate, the more you inform, the more you speak, it helps people connect to the broader sort of vision and the long term the company objective. The second one is I think sometimes when you become bigger, the teams start getting in silos, and therefore sometimes you don't have a proper picture of what others are doing and what somebody else are doing. And for that, I think in today's context, when the teams are getting more remote or distant and different locations, how do you bring people together such that everybody understands what each one of their impact is at an overall level? That also definitely helps when people to sort of retain and keep them motivated. And I think the last one is obviously you praise in public and you berate in private. It never goes out of fashion. But even at the senior most level, you do need encouragement. You do need encouragement at a more sort of open forum and open places. And that, while it works for right at the front line and mid-level team members also, but even at the top level, senior levels, you do need encouragement, and you do need the focus on why what you're doing has helped the organization. Just bringing out those success stories. Even today, when we go out, we do talk about success stories of, even if it's a small thing as winning a new contract, because you do need that positive reinforcement, aligning it back to the vision, and so on and so forth. And those two, three things definitely helped us in getting people aligned and letting people come along in the common vision.
Great, totally makes sense, Mayank. So in the interest of time, there are a couple of other topics. I was also paying attention to some of the requests from the audience, and I have that as another theme. I think what I see here is what's the most important point to consider while doing capital investment. I think tying to that, let's look at it a bit more holistically for the benefit of audience. Yeah, Hari, you said, you embarked on the journey. I think probably that's the case for Chaitanya and Mayank as well. But you are very explicit that you guys were keen on bootstrapping it, and you sort of went down that path until you attained product market fit, and then you entertained in an investment route. So I want to just get some broader understanding from three of you. How do you actually raise the institutional round? When do you raise, and not how? When do you actually raise the institutional round? And what do how do you balance the investor expectations, for the long-term vision that you have? Some of you briefly spoke about the need to sort of, manage that, but maybe a bit more nuanced. How do you actually put a concerted effort to, ensure that your long-term vision is not compromised when you're raising institutional round? So maybe, yeah, when is the right time, and then how do you strike that balance, and what worked from your experiences, and your interfacing with investors, especially your, st- struggling in, potentially compromising on the vision, and what worked.
So
Yeah.
maybe I'll just get started on this, and then maybe Satyanarayana can come along. So I feel maybe the best investor to raise money is essentially in education, because a slightly negative working capital is the customer. So they are the best investors who can come in and give you the money to run the first few batches without actually burning money, because they put in the money upfront. But in the journey, there are periods of time or the moments in time when you realize that this is the time when we need a slightly more orbital shift, and because education is um, it is little bit like a box by box business, and therefore you win one course, as Chaitanya was saying, then you win another course, and you win another course, and you win another course, and you sort of scale up with that. And the course will go to a certain level, and then it sort of caps out at that play. I think there are times and moments when you feel that, look, now I have got into a place where I know that every course I launch, I will manage, let's say, that 30-40% CAC or 50% CAC, and I'm able to get to that very quickly. And this is a time that I need to move from, let's say, 100 programs or 5 courses to 50 courses. And that requires a bit of capital investment. So once you know that you have figured out the way of scaling things, then expanding the horizon in terms of more courses, more curriculum, more sort of subject areas becomes one interesting point for people to look at scaling. Another place where we feel people have looked at raising capital, and this has happened in other places also, is that when you have figured out, when you're running, let's say, offline institution, and not just sort of technology-led programs and businesses, you do see that, look, I have now figured out how one center in 6 months or 18 months time gets to profitability, to move from 1 to 20. So I think those are inflection points, is what I would say, that comes your way, either expansion of courses or expansion of distribution, where people look for raising capital and then moving. And that time you just need people who are aligned to your values and mission, rather than money has the same color, but vision does not have the same color. That's where you need alignment meaningfully.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mike. Maybe just to add, Ravi, to that, one for us is, as we touched upon, is to be extremely clear why you need the funding. So in the case of Emeritus, of the first 7 years of our journey, we haven't raised, we bootstrapped, right? So we raised money when we knew that, okay, we have to invest in terms of creating courses, in terms as we are scaling up our online offerings, and that would not be possible with the way that we have accrued profits, as well as plowing back our earnings, etc. So to Mayank's point, as we are trying to get to the next orbit, as we do that, as much as you're talking about raising the money, it's also important to have the choice of what kind of investor you want to get on the cap table. So that's where I think alignment on your vision, or having alignment on that long-term goal, because education, I think I remember Mr. Pawar talking about it. One should have a very long-term view. It's not that education is a business. It's not that you could do, or you could have an exit in the next 1 or 2 quarters, or in a given year. Somebody should not be in this particular sector. So in the same way, I think the investor should have a long-term view. Luckily for us, we have investors who are balance sheet investors, for example, in our cap table, or who do have this impact as at the core of their thesis. Right, so that helps, especially for this particular sector. So to align in terms of how you want to grow and where you want to grow, so that you don't take this myopic decisions, or look at bad growth opportunities, as I would like to call. So I think the aspect about alignment on this long-term vision is one, and then ability to choose the investors, right, and at the same time make sure that everybody on the cap table is aligned in terms of how you want to where you want to take the ship, and they're in full support of it, and fundamentally ask the fundamental question on why do you need the capital, rather than because that's not the win in itself. It's a means to a greater objective.
No, you guys really hit the point home. The onus is on the founder to really understand why you need and when you need, and the clarity has to be absolutely established without any ambiguity. Not They don't raise just because somebody is willing to write a check. And second, there's upfront diligence that you need to do to ensure that the kind of investor, the quality, the color of money is aligned to your vision and long-term vision, right? And there are many ways to raise money and many classes of investors, and you need to pick the right one. Well articulated.
Ravi, if I may just add a small point there.
Yeah,
Right?
please go ahead.
So I think absolutely agree with everything that Mayank and Chaitanya said. As an entrepreneur, I think it is extremely important to be brave enough to say no, right? And that is the trap that many entrepreneurs fall into, where they just don't, say no, right? Whether it is who you're raising money from, or once the investor is on board, what they want you to do, right? So I think if the entrepreneur there has conviction, right, to say that this is not something, I'm not okay with this, right? This is not my vision. This is not what the company is being built for, right? Just that ability to say no, I think, will help entrepreneurs go a long way. It is hard. It is easier said than done, but in the long term, it only earns you more respect, right? And from everybody around you. So I think that is a behavior, if more entrepreneurs can imbibe, I think that'll help them.
Absolutely. And maybe I have enough time to just cover one other theme. In the interest, given that we are talking about building scalable business while maintaining sustainability, another thing that comes to my mind that's very important is to ensure the business that you embarked on doesn't get commoditized over the length of the time that you've been at, right? What is relevant and what is differentiated, what is perceived to be unique value may not remain the same for eternity. So how do you sort of constantly keep a watch on ensuring the products and services are not going to be commoditized, and what is that you need to do organizationally speaking? And when you're entering, more so when you're entering a crowded market, and well-funded startups, big enough problem statement, big enough TAM, but it's a red ocean. And how do you stay on the treadmill, innovate for the future while ensuring that you're not compromising the current needs, serving the current customers?
Maybe Ravi, let me take a stab at it. Look, I think in case of education, the aspect is not about commoditization, but it's more about are the outcomes being degraded from cohort to cohort, from year to year? And I think that's the thing to watch out for when it comes to be it a career outcome, learning outcome, etc. that we do. And of course, there are enough and more metrics that we track to ensure that the satisfaction, the NPS, the career outcomes, the learning outcomes, they are maintained, or we find ways to uphold them. So yeah, unlike other sectors, the aspect is might not categorize as commoditization, but degradation of outcomes. And so there are few ways. One is in terms of how do we make the programs, the degrees, diplomas, certificates that you're doing relevant. Because at the end of the day, a company is investing in this is to ensure that the employee back at work is doing much better in terms of productivity or effectiveness. Individual investing in himself or herself is to achieve a better career growth. This is something that has to be the North Star, and we compass in terms of what we track, and to ensure that the courses are relevant, the outcomes are met, and that's what ensures that there is willingness to pay. Your CAC is down, unit economics are healthy.
Great. Excellent. Yeah.
If I may just add on, see, I think in this whole business of building scalable, sustainable education businesses, often as you scale, the focus gets lost on the ed part of edtech, right? Whereas that is the core, right? So the beauty about building a business in education is that you can build a business, but you can also create long-lasting impact, right? And I'm sure that is the reason why all three of us, chose education as the space to build businesses in. So to answer your question, Ravi, I think it's extremely important that you constantly look at the product offering, right? And see whether it is in tune with learner expectations, right? Because expectations also evolve over a period of time, right? And are you being able to deliver, to Chaitanya's point, the outcomes that learners are expecting, right? And the best way and the only way to do that is keep speaking to your learners, keep speaking to customers, right? To understand their experience better and what is it that you can improve. So it's an iterative process that I don't think ever stops, and that is the way that you evolve and go from strength to strength.
Maybe just to add one small point, Ravi, just to this thing that I think in education, the product market fit as a concept doesn't work, or there's no word as product market fit because it's constantly evolving. And there's actually not product market fit, there's a product market channel fit also, because the channel also changes, the customer acquisition channel. I think all three has to align. Just one point to add to what Hari said. I think it's not just the candidate and the learner expectation that is changing. I think equally important in some of the cases of what you do in EdTech and education is how the recruiters are changing their thought process. And very simple example, I think data science was big about 5 years back, then became machine learning, then got AI, then Gen AI. And I think a lot of these innovations start happening at the recruiter level first, and then the learner starts sort of picking that up. So I think just being in touch with both the sides of the marketplace, which is one side is people who are recruiting and one side where people are sort of seeking courses, that bit is equally important for half of the one part of the content team at Upgrad. Ravi just looks at JDs and job descriptions, and that's how they figure out what to do in the process.
No, brilliant. That was a brilliant point, and I think Chaitanya, you also actually corrected me, if you will, when I said commoditization. I think that's a wrong articulation from my part. It's more about staying relevant and staying, contemporary, and having that keen eye to the emerging needs of the market. There are many ways to do that, and Mayank, you just spoke about one. Gleaning all the job descriptions that are, in the works, and then taking that as one of the inputs for you to design courses and curriculums to stay relevant, right? And I think staying relevant is not a one-time job. You have to be on the treadmill, and you have to be cognizant of various other dynamics that are at play. And as long as you keep doing it, I think you're in business. So well said, all of you. One last thing. I don't want to end, being a CDO myself, I don't want to end this panel discussion without touching upon the topic of technology, AI, and how that is helping EdTech businesses, both in terms of scaling and also improving the profitability. All right, the both top line and bottom line. How you guys embarking on a journey? In the past, it was more about tech enabling your business. Now it's AI first thinking. Maybe your parting shots on that piece before we wind up.
Yeah, I'll take a stab at it, Ravi. So for us, we think of, especially there's a lot of talk about will AI be replacing the traditional learning models, etc. So I view it as AI being an enabler rather than in terms of how internet played a role, or even before that in terms of how calculator played a role in terms of improving the skills. So for us across the value chain, when you look at the market research or creating the courses, right, or enrollment, marketing, and delivery, we think of AI, how is it adding a layer to make it better at the end for the learner in terms of enriching the learning or improving the outcomes. So that's how we view at it. So in terms of using that to short circuit the market research that's needed, using Gen AI related tools, how can we use that in learning design in terms of creating up-to-date content rather than some recorded videos, etc. And in terms of delivery, how do we use AI as a tutor or an assistant for each learner to personalize, etc. So that's how we are seeing this in the process. Hopefully then for a learner who has been there maybe 4 years ago on a given subject, the outcomes that he or she might have seen versus now with these added tools, we believe that the learning outcomes or the career outcomes will be much, much better. That's how we are looking at this, and we are making investments on that.
Anyone else want to add to what?
Yeah. So from our perspective, similar to what Chaitanya mentioned, from a from if you look at it from the lens of the learner, I think the real benefit that we are able to provide to learners with the help of AI is that we are able to make learning adaptive and personalized, right? And on-demand support, right? So I think for every learner, that is something that matters a lot, because what you're trying to learn is a skill which is hard to acquire, right? So in that journey of you acquiring that skill, obviously there will be points in time where you have questions and you want those to be answered and you want them to be answered right now. In a non-AI world, this was all done through ticketing and humans and all of that, right? Whereas now through AI assistants and AI mentors, the help is available on hand, right? So I think that really enhances the whole learner experience. When we look at it from an organization standpoint, I think today almost every function across great learning uses Gen AI to drive higher efficiency, higher productivity. So we are able to do a lot more without linearly having to expand the team or the number of people, and that's a real benefit that we see. And on the market side, on the demand front, of course, the need to learn AI is what is really kind of helping the growth of the business.
Yeah, fantastic. And I think personally, I'm more excited about folks like you, doubling down on learners' experiences. And if we can actually bring AI to the party and ensure that you're building a platform that enables personalized experiences at scale, and the learning outcomes can be very different from what we see today. I think.
Yes, Ravi, I think there's one small thing I want to add. I think because Hari also mentioned this thing, I think this AI era, and I got this quote and it fits in really well for the AI ecosystem, that people will make more money by being brave than by being brilliant. I think in this era, somebody has to take bold steps because today a lot of things, it has democratized a lot. I don't think a younger founder also today can actually create a product which is as good or superior than what exists for a very long time. And somebody has to just flip the problem statement and look at it in a very differentiated lateral way altogether.
Great. So I think I'm just looking at the time. We ran out of time, and there are many things that we could have covered, but I just chose a few things that I thought more relevant for the audience, especially from three of you having embarked on this journey and scale the businesses that you built. It's absolute pleasure to talk to three of you, and we covered many. I may not be able to summarize all, and hopefully this is recorded and it'll be put out there for folks to consume at their leisure. And thank you guys. Really appreciate you taking the time and do the very best in your respective businesses. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you all for such an engaging discussion. Up next, we have an exciting fireside chat featuring Mr. Rajan Anandan in conversation with Mr. Vijay Thadani on fundraising in a difficult macro, understanding investors' expectations. We are honored to have Mr. Rajan Anandan, Managing Director at Peak 15 Partners and former MD Google India and Southeast Asia. With his vast experience in venture capital and scaling businesses, he brings deep insights into the evolving investment landscape. Alongside him is Mr. Vijay Thadani, Vice Chairman and MD of NIIT, who has been pivotal in transforming the education and skilling industry. We encourage the audience to participate by typing their questions in the chat box. Our speakers will address them at the end of the session. Without further ado, over to you, Mr. Thadani.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. This is perhaps the most interesting part of the Edtech Summit because this is where the rubber meets the road. We are going to discuss how do you raise funds. In the previous discussion, we were saying you have to be brave rather than brilliant, but brave with an empty pocket is a little more difficult than brilliant with lots of money in your pocket. So brave with money in pocket is, I think, really the issue. And the Indian EdTech ecosystem has seen dramatic shifts in the past few years, from pandemic-fueled hyper growth, where everybody who thought they wrote EdTech in their resume on their card or in the matrimonial ad, they had a better chance at grabbing the future. to the current phase in which there is consolidation and focus on sustainable business models, which I'm sure Rajan will talk to us through. And we have a tech leader and a very seasoned investor. I'm hesitating to use the word veteran. Seasoned is perhaps the more appropriate term. And who's been a technology leader at Google and as an investor at Sequoia and now Peak 15 Partners. Rajan, before I get going, I've always been curious to say, how did the name Peak 15 come up?
Yeah, thank you, Vijay, for and team for inviting me. Great to be here with all of you. So Peak 15, Vijay, it was the fifth. It's basically Mount Everest. So before Mount Everest was named Everest, it was the 15th peak in the range in the archaeological survey of that range. So that's sort of what it is.
Okay, and Mount Everest it is.
Yeah, it's meant to symbolize the highest peaks that you can get to. So we want to help, we want to partner with founders who want to build the most enduring, most iconic companies on planet Earth.
No, wonderful. So well thought of. So how would you like to define the current economic environment, macroeconomic environment for fundraising? And the other winter is nearly getting over. Is this a funding winter, or it's normal times, or
yeah, it's a good question. Vijay, so this is business as usual. So I'll tell you, I think let's just use numbers because that's usually helpful. So if you go back to 2019, we were at about 10, 11 billion of annual funding. 2020 was COVID, so it dropped a little below 10 billion. And then we had two very unusual years that were driven really by this extraordinary, unprecedented liquidity around the world because of COVID, which was 2021 and 2022. So in 2021, we went from basically about 10 billion a year to 45 billion a year. And then 2022 was also quite elevated. It was about 25 billion a year. And then 2023 came down to about 7 billion a year. And 2024, I think when all the numbers settle, will probably be in that 12 billion type range, right? So we are back to sort of being in the run rate of, call it 10, 12, 13 billion range. And I think from here on out, it'll probably grow at, call it 15, 20%. So I think if you're an early stage company, it's important to keep in, when I say early stage, I mean seed, Series A, Series B. This is business as usual. I mean, it's not gonna, let's hope that we don't go back to 2021 because, that required the entire world to shut down because of COVID. This is sort of what it's going to be like, and it's very active seed market, very active Series A market, Series B market a little slower. I think what has changed is the growth market. And actually it's changed because of a very positive dynamic, Vijay, which is the IPO market opening up for profitable Indian companies, right? Be they funded, venture funded or not. As you know, last year, India had 300 IPOs, 80 on the main board. In fact, on a number of IPOs basis, India had more IPOs than NASDAQ and the next two markets combined. And if you look at absolute dollars raised from IPOs, it was the second largest in the world last year after NASDAQ, after the US, NASDAQ and NSE. So in fact, I think there was about 20 billion of capital raised from IPOs last year in India. China's number was 9 billion. The UK was about 10 billion. So, it's that's very positive because both for founders and for investors, because it gives the ability to take a company public. You create some liquidity for your early investors and your employees. And then, you basically build like for the next 30, 40 years, much like you all did for many years at NIIT. The negative effect of that is for growth investors. This is actually a very good thing for founders, by the way. For growth investors, is if you're a late stage founder, you're trying to ask the question, should I now go public or should I raise private capital? And given the kind of multiples that companies were able to get, now that has changed in the last 3-4 months. I think the long-term average PE has just dropped below 21, which is in the Indian markets, it's I think 20 point something now. but it was going to 24, 25 before, if you go back middle of last year. So if you put those two things together, really, there's never been a better time to be building a company, building a startup, raising capital in India, because early stage, there's a lot of capital, it's very active. And late stage, if you can get a profitable company, as you know, I mean, if you can get to about 100 crores of EBITDA, you're going to have a very successful IPO on the main board as long as you're growing at 25% minimum and your consistent performance, right? You can't sort of you need to be able to predict what you're going to do, etc. So long answer to your question, this is business as usual, and it's a great time for entrepreneurs.
So I'm very happy you talked about the public markets. I don't think we even have a 2-digit number for publicly listed Indian edtech companies as yet. I would say it's less than 10 perhaps. Would that be right?
Vijay, I don't know what the number is. I think there are 30 venture funded. Now, you don't have to be venture funded. As you know, most companies are not, but only about 30 or 35 venture funded companies that have gone public in India ever, right? But that number is growing by leaps and bounds. Last year, the number was 12 or 13. This year will probably be 20. So I think you'll see that happening. I mean, as you mentioned, even in your opening, I think because of the large amounts of funding that went into lots of sectors, including edtech, right? The profit priority didn't exist, and you can't really list in India unless you're profitable. Yeah. So that's a big difference between here and the US. In the US, you show a path to profitability, you can list. In India, it's much harder. I mean, Swiggy did it, but they sort of said they'd get profitable in a year, right? I think the only company that is listed without a very clear line of sight to profitability is actually Ola Electric. And that stock, I mean, it's a very, 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 very good company, but that stock's been a bit challenged because of that.
Right. And
so I think that will change. My view is that picture of how many, and by the way, I actually, from a startup standpoint, like edtech is not a thing anymore. So I mean, basically, as investors, we're looking for education companies. Some of them are deeply technology enabled, others have a light technology angle. So I think edtech, I mean, we haven't talked about an edtech company in about a year and a half. So first big thing is don't position yourself as an edtech company. By the way, if you're a tech company, education AI is very interesting, but needs to be a native AI, native AI education company. That is very interesting. So today is really about education.
No, I think this is a very interesting point you read. EdTech has to go out of our vocabulary. It's actually a bad word to use now in sentences.
I would not use EdTech. I would not use EdTech.
Yeah. So Rajiv, we have to change the name of the Growth Summit.
Yeah, just call it like innovation in education,
Yeah.
Like it's really innovation, right? You could have innovative offline formats, you can innovative schools, innovative pedagogy, innovative technology. It's really about innovation in education, not necessarily, a lot of it will be, of course, enabled by technology. But I think this idea of pure play tech companies, I think some of them will come back. Like there'll be a new wave of companies that are AI first, etc. Actually, about a month ago, we were evaluating a very, very interesting AI education company in India. But anyway, that's just parlance. And by the way, it changes every couple of years. So you just have to sort of, especially if you're fundraising, you just have to know like what are some terms you probably don't want to use.
Yeah. So that's a good segue to the discussion that was happening in the previous chat also, I mean, that you heard, where I think we were looking at how AI has a profound impact. And we truly believe in NIIT and in NIIT University, we're doing a lot of work there, that AI has a very, very huge potential to actually disrupt education the way it has been taught over centuries. And there are some models which are doing that. I wanted to understand, and you just mentioned that, I wanted to know, how do investors look at AI? And the word AI is a very nice thing to add to anything. I have a car, it is an AI-driven car. I have an education model, it is an AI-based, AI-enabled, AI-driven. all kinds of words are being used. I'm sure there is a hype and then there is a reality. And I heard you talk about AI native AI based education models. I think are the ones that you folks look at carefully. So talk to us a little more about that, and how do you evaluate when you hear the word AI along with the description?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good question. Firstly, by the way, if you look at the AI stack, Vijay, right, there's, at the bottom of the stack, you have GPUs, right? So think about companies like NVIDIA. Then you have sort of the cloud providers who play in it. Then you have the foundation or the frontier model companies, OpenAI, Gemini, etc., Anthropic, and so on. And then you have sort of infra tooling companies. And finally, you have the application layer, right? So when we talk about AI education companies, we're really talking about application companies, right? They leverage many models. Usually now this idea of only building on one model is sort of dead. So they will leverage many models, and now many of those are also agentic companies, which founders who are obviously building in AI know exactly what I'm talking about. So I think the way we look at this is to say, okay, let's just take some examples, right? Let's say the Edtech 1.0, Vijay, or maybe it was 2.0, I don't know, but this whole idea of live 1:1 lectures, okay? As you know, companies generate a lot of revenue doing that. So let's say let's say your primary offering is a live tutor doing one-to-many online. And let's say you're using some AI tools to summarize what the students are saying and maybe doing some basic responses. That is not a native AI company. Okay?
Yeah.
Native AI company is, let's say, an AI tutor. This, by the way, the technology isn't there for the vision I'm just about to give, but I think in the next year we'll get there. It is an AI tutor, right? Literally, it is not a human. It is teaching one-on-one, and it's highly personalized. So it is truly, I mean, that, by the way, that vision is probably 12, maybe 18 months away. The only reason it's not there now is that AI tutor, there's a bit of latency, and, it may not be able to hold for 2 hours back and forth, etc. Right? So that's an AI native company, right? So for instance, this company that I was referring to, that we met a couple of weeks ago, which is very interesting, they use, number one, AI to make video content. So far, about 50% of their content is delivered by a human, but all the material, that they use is developed by AI. But 50% of the content is actually delivered by AI. So it's almost like, this is AI, this is Rajan AI talking to you, not the human AI. Although, Vijay, you never know these days. It might be the AI Rajan,
How do I ensure
actually,
that this time not?
That's the whole point. Actually, in a year, I think within 2 years for Vijay, I mean, certainly we can have this. We will be having this chat, and it will actually be my AI, because like the tech will get to a point, and maybe it won't have as many sort of expressions of my hands and so on, but so on. So I would say, like, let's say, like, for instance, right, if you're not doing deep one-to-one personalization on a real-time basis, that's not a AI education company, right? Because that is the basic sort of things, right? And then, are you using AI in every part of your quote unquote value chain, right? Content creation, pedagogy development, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe pedagogy is not driven by AI. So that's sort of the way we think about it, right? So for instance, you had 2 primary models in EdTech 1.0. One was the one-to-many live classes. That is not AI. The second was recorded content delivered to individuals that really didn't have any personalization or interactivity, and that is not AI either, right? So you could imagine a one-to-one model where the content is developed with AI, and you start with 10 or 20% AI, and then you kind of go to 100, whatever, maybe not 100%, but 80% AI. But then the content is delivered to the student. Let's say it's video content, right? It's video combined with some audio and whatnot, but it's very interactive. I think this idea of highly personalized is probably the single biggest thing, right? Which is, At the end of the day, that's what you should be able to do, right? If I have a, I believe, Vijay, that the world's most advanced AI tutor will be built in India, not because we have the best AI talent yet, because we have the biggest need. We have the most acute need. I mean, as you know, right? We have 250 million students in K through 12. We have another 40 million in higher ed, and we just don't have enough teachers. We don't have enough schools, and so on and so forth. So I know it's a long answer to your question, but that's sort of how we think about. So we can look at a business very quickly and say, even if the founder is saying it's an AI company, okay, they're using some AI tools, but it's not really a native AI company, right? And by the way, to build a real native AI company is really hard. That's not easy, right? So the founders who end up doing that, I mean, we did invest in a Berkeley PhD. He came out with a PhD in computer science and AI at Berkeley, who's building a global, India is one of his markets, but it's not like the primary market, where he's building, for a certain kind of test prep. I mean, it is entirely AI driven. And when we look at the results that they're able to, like the outcomes that they're able to deliver, it's a very early stage company. It's very good, right? So let me pause there, Vijay. I hope that brings it to life.
Yeah. So my question is, a person who has a vision for a native AI model over a period of time, because the person will have to come with lots of money for him to even think that native AI is a possibility. So would you also encourage somebody who has the potential to move from let's say, using it in content development or personalization or in some other form, for example, being an assistant to the teacher rather than a direct tutor?
Yeah, terrific. I mean, that's a co-pilot. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you could build different. And I think the thing that a lot of people get wrong, Vijay, today, to build a very powerful AI application actually doesn't take a lot of money. Because the big money is spent on training the frontier models, etc., right? That's the 500 billion Stargate project, although, DeepSeek showed it can be done for a few $1 million by distillation. So I think the key thing is it actually doesn't take a lot of money. It requires a very deep domain understanding, right? How does it really work? What are the workflows, et cetera, et cetera. And then it does require an understanding of the AI technology and being able to code an app, right? And work through, how do you work with different LLMs and how do you fine tune them? So what you need is you need good AI knowledge and you need good domain expertise. You actually don't need capital. You need some capital, but it's not really a lot of capital, right? I haven't really put this to test yet, but my hypothesis is if you have a very high caliber team, somebody who understands the domain, somebody who's very good at AI, who's built and shipped AI products, I bet you, Google or AWS, GCP, they give you $100,000 or $200,000 credits. You can probably build something and get it up and running, a basic version. And I think that is the beauty of all these billions of dollars that have gone into these models, both the closed models like OpenAI, but also, the open source models like Llama and now DeepSeek and many others like that.
Yeah.
It's not very expensive, but you do need deep technical expertise. You don't need a PhD in computer science from Stanford, but you need enough working understanding of AI, of how agentic, sort of, you need to kind of know that stuff, but not as much capital.
No, I think that's a very relevant and good comment, because that should provide a lot of encouragement to guys who have the brains but not the wallet as yet, or access to the wallet. So at least there is a very strong hope. Let's just shift. What do you look for when you look at a potential investee? Somebody comes to you with a pitch. What are 3-4 things that you look for? This will be very useful advice for the 200 odd people that we have on this who are listening to you at this point of time.
Yeah, I think, look, it depends on the stage, Vijay. So if it's a seed stage company, just to give you a sense, 30% of our firm, Peak 15, our seed business is called Surge externally. 30% of our seed stage investments there's not a single line of code written. We're basically building on a founding team or a founder and a market that we like. Another third is maybe they've launched something that's got a bit of traction, etc. So seed stage, and I'll come back and talk about that. Series A is different, Series B is different. So what we look for is different by stage. Across all of those, we look for strong founding teams that have deep domain expertise, that are very insightful, that we think are going to go at it for 10, 15, 20 years to build a company. At seed stage, what we're particularly looking for is really the bet is on the founding team. And we're trying to say, okay, is this market interesting? Do we think a big company can be built, right? So let's say an AI in education company came and pitched to us, and they had a deep domain expert who comes with a very deep understanding of some sub-segment of education. But the co-founder, who's sort of the AI guy or gal, was not deep. We would not invest in that company because, somebody else will out execute them because this stuff is moving really quickly, right? Now, if they've launched and they've got some early traction, we would look at sort of the early traction to say, look, have they built a product that people like? Do they use it? Are they continuing to use it? We look at engagement, things like that. So that is at seed stage. So it's largely almost entirely a founder bet. Then at Series A, so by the way, seed is, call it, a couple of crores to maybe, call it 25 crores, okay? Or maybe 30 crores. That's seed. That's the range, the very broad range, depending on the caliber of the founding team, what stage you're in, how much you've made progress, etc. At Series A, which is, call it 50 to 100 crore round, we are looking for, again, the same thing, which is a great founding team, etc. But we're looking for product market fit. So if you don't have PMF, you're not going to raise a Series A, okay? Not in today's market, and not in, well, if you're like a really, really hot AI team and, you have a little bit of early traction because there's so much interest in AI, you still might raise it, but otherwise generally not. At Series B, you want PMF and you want an economic engine. What I mean by that is, let's say you're building an AI thing and you got great usage, you got great retention, but your revenue model is still very early. That's okay for Series A, but not at Series B. At Series B, you want to see that there's a way to generate revenue, the gross margins are strong, the contribution margin, even if it's break even, you can see it getting to positive, etc. So I would say Series C and beyond, it's about an economic engine, it's about a business model. And by Series D, there's really no appetite for companies that lose money, right? So I'd say that is the way, right? So you start at seed with the founder and a story, to then product market fit in Series A, and then Series B is really about an economic engine.
Okay. We could have gone on and on, but the minute I see Neha, I know there is somebody going to stop us in a few minutes. I do want to touch two small things. One, how should the founders navigate a conversation with the investors? So if a founder walked into your room, how would you expect him to present himself or herself? I mean, we always use the word himself. I think we should do many more ourselves.
Yeah, ourselves, yes. Look, I mean, if it's the first meeting, I think the introduction is really, really important, because that is what will give people a sense of, is there a reason why this founder or this founding team could win in this market? But the other thing though is, don't drag on for 10 minutes, because, keep it to 3, 4, 5 minutes, but say the things that are relevant in your background, that make it interesting and like superbly clear why your founding team has the right to be winning in this market. So I think that is one. I think second is just, firstly, just never be late, try not to be late, because if you're late to the meeting, it's unlikely you're going to build a company.
You're late to the market anyway, then.
Yeah, right. So, I mean, I've always said, right, if you're late to a meeting, there's no chance you're going to build a company. But other than that, look, I would just look, I think there's a playbook of great decks. I mean, like, for instance, you can go online, you can do a search for Surge, and, you can get those decks. Just knowing how to tell the story, there's a sequence that kind of works and so on. But really try to come across as somebody who's deeply insightful. See, you have to sell the problem, right? A lot of people just go right in to telling me what the product is or the service is or the solution is. that is a bad idea because I don't know what the problem is, right? Like, don't assume that your investors know some, of course, if you're going and talking to a fintech investor and they've done 25 fintech investments, of course they know what the problem is. But still, it's always the best founders sell the problem more than they sell their solution. Because if I can hook you on the problem and make sure that it's okay, wow, this is like a really huge problem you're trying to solve, and now you've got insights about how you're going to solve the problem, then I'll buy the solution, right? Like, say, okay, fine, yeah, I'd say that's what it is. And then last thing I'd say is, look, just say it like it is. People try to make up stuff. I mean, look, we do this for a living every single day, So when a founder tries to make stuff up, it's just like we can see it like that. And keep in mind, whatever you say, the investors are going to remember when you show back up 6 months later. So we'll have, because, we track companies, okay? So, we have a lot of founders which will come and say, hey, look, I'm at whatever, let's just make up a number. I'm at 5 crores of revenue. Next year, we're going to be at 12 crores of revenue. And the year after that, we're going to be at 18 crores, right? They come back a year later and they're at 7.2 crores. I mean, this is not a company. I'm not going to invest in this company. Now, I don't know what happened. I don't really care because you said 12 and you ended up at 7.2, So, and this is what people don't remember is that investors remember and actually they write stuff down. We have a database where we go and say, what did these guys tell us? Because by the way, it is a great signal. It is a great way to figure out whether a team is on top of things, right? Of course, you can only come, and also by the way, don't commit these things if you don't have product market fit. If you don't have product market fit, you have to just keep iterating till you find product market fit. But I hope that's helpful. And keep in mind that either there's an intellectual element to investors and there's an emotional element to the investor. The best founders just build tremendous emotional excitement. Like, for instance, if you have no energy in your pitch, boy, it's just hard. I mean, your investors just can't wait for the meeting to end. Like if you're you have no energy, why? Like, why on earth do I think you're going to build a company over the next 20 years?
These are phenomenal insights. I don't think any class would teach us this or any course would teach us this. Rajan, really, really, very, very thanks. Many, many thanks to you for just being available and speaking from your heart. And I think the last 3 or 4 insights that you gave were truly good. I'm also wondering what we did 43 years ago. At that time, I don't think investors were as discerning as you are. And we maybe got away with lesser things. But I think the emotional part of your pitch has to be very, very high, a very deep commitment and conviction in what you're doing. So thank you very much for sharing your insights. I think the good news is, number one, it's business as usual. I heard you say it's business as usual. Second, just attaching the word AI is not going to solve the problem. The third, native AI does not. A native AI-based thinking needs more brains than brawn. And therefore, if you can demonstrate the brains, then the money is available, and I think it can be funded, and it doesn't cost a lot of money. And the third is that you have to be there at the right time with the right pitch and the right emotion. And I said you value the problem more than the solution that he's building. I think those are some very, very useful things. So very much like we said, if you are late for the meeting, then you don't have a chance. If you don't end the meeting on time, then I don't have a chance further in dealing with Neha.
Yeah, Vijay, I'll wrap on this. I had a big change I made to my calendar last week. I used to have these 30-minute meetings. I've now moved to 15-minute meetings.
By the way, I've heard this as well. I've heard this in one of the companies my daughter works. And she says all meetings now start at 5 minutes past the hour, right? And they finish at 20 minutes past the hour.
Yeah, 15-minute meetings. Because I think most things can be, like, unless you have to, have a long alignment meeting, lots of people disagreeing, etc. Otherwise, actually, most meetings are useless anyway. But like, if you're going to meet, because, you could just send an email update or whatever, right? Like, do a WhatsApp, what do you think, kind of thing. All right, Vijay, well, thank you so much for having me.
But this was not a meeting. This was not a meeting. This was an interesting
No,
conversation.
this is
and thanks you very
no,
much.
I'm not talking about I'm not talking about this. But Vijay, thank
Thank
you for
you.
having
All
me.
right.
I think for founders who are building, wish you all the very best. Look, it's just a phenomenal time to be building, right? Just make sure that you have a value proposition that students love, that they're willing to pay you for, and then they keep paying for. And it's very simple, really. I'll end with this, Vijay. I always say, like, look, the math has to work. If the math works, you're going to build a great company. If the math doesn't work, probably not. All right, thank you.
Right. All right. Thanks a
Bye-bye.
lot, Rajan. Thanks for your
Bye-bye.
time. Bye-bye.
Thank you for a truly insightful and engaging exchange of ideas. It was really a treat to listen to. May I now invite Mr. Rajendra Singh Pawar, Chairman and Co-founder of NIIT Group, and Professor Prakash Gopalan, President of NIIT University, to officially launch the 4th cohort of the Founders Growth Camp.
Prakash, please go ahead. My job is done. You have 4 minutes.
Before I go into the launch, very many thanks to all the panelists and to for the nice fireside chat that we had. As far as the growth camp is concerned, so far we have had 3 growth camps at the university, and a total of about 26 founders or startup founders attended these camps, and they have gained enormously from these camps in terms of almost $900,000 worth of benefits from the Microsoft Founders Hub, the NIIT Edtech Growth Summit's technology partner. Top 2 startups received more than $150,000 worth of benefits each, again from the Microsoft Founders Hub. The top 6 founders received one-on-one mentorship from NIIT founders. Top 2 startups received funding post attending the Founders Growth Camp, and participant of previous growth camp, Air Black, received in fact funding from the founders of the NIIT group. I would like to say that attending therefore this growth camp and being selected for it is a milestone in itself. And the 4th Founders Growth Camp will be organized by the Center for Innovation, Incubation and Entrepreneurship at NIIT University at the campus in Neemrana in the period April 9th to April 11th. It will be a 3-day event where we will have multiple masterclass sessions by experts on business strategy, leveraging generative AI, building a scalable online edtech platform, product thinking, as well as fundraising. Along with masterclasses, we will also have multiple open house and ask me anything sessions for the first 2 days on 9th and 10th. The founders will get a chance to pitch for their startup for funding on April 11th. The representatives of InfoEdge Ventures, Helion Ventures, 314 Capital, Mela Ventures, Titan Capital, Blink Capital, and Bloom Ventures have shared their insights to the EdTech startup community in the past under the NIIT's growth program. So on this note, I would like to end my part of the evening. Jai Hind, over to Mr. Pawar.
Well, I think you said all that needs to be said. Just to say that we, all of us NIIT founders and Professor Gopalan and team and Professor Vikas Upadhyay, has not been visible as the man behind all of this, we get a lot of satisfaction. Let me just say, watching all of you learn something new, and we get a lot of feedback. So I'm looking forward to meeting those of you who have conversation and find it meaningful to be on campus. So looking forward to that, and looking forward to another program. And as it always happens, I think it's program going from strength to strength. Lots to be learned by the university team. But I did get feedback from the last year's founders. They gave a lot of suggestions on what to improve. So I'm looking forward to Professor Vikas and team improving the experience over last year and making it even better for those of you who will be with us. So thanks for your time. Thanks to all the speakers. Thanks, Neha, to you and Vikas, who's backstage, and many others are managing things on time. We have a minute to go so we can finish on time. Back to you, Neha.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. With this, we conclude today's proceedings. We truly appreciate your participation and engagement. Have a wonderful time ahead. See you soon.